Chapter 652. Shi Mengwan didn't notice Zhang Hao's gaze. Her thoughts were a little adrift. For so many years, she had been searching and searching. At first, he was filled with hope, but later, he felt that his hope was getting slimmer and slimmer. She didn't forget her dear brother, but she kept him in the depths of her heart. She would not easily recall it, otherwise, she would feel very uncomfortable. But ever since she met Zhang Hao, she had been reminiscing about the past more and more. She didn't like it very much. The more she recalled, the more it reminded her that she and dear brother might not be fated to be together. Just like today, she had already regarded Zhang Hao and her dear brother as two different people, but she saw this side of Zhang Hao. For a moment, she was in a trance, as if she had returned to more than 10 years ago. He was the same, always arguing with others, always fighting with others. She could not help thinking of them as one person. It was too similar. Not only her looks, but also, suddenly, an enlarged face appeared in front of him. The malicious eyes that were no different from those in her memory stared at her. Shi Mengwan was startled and took a step back. Behind her was the sofa, and her back touched the back of it. Zhang Hao's body leaned over, and Shi Mengwan gulped. "Mr. Zhang, the wound has been bandaged. You can go now." Zhang Hao pursed his lips slightly and looked at the nervousness on Shi Mengwan's face. He stretched his hands forward and placed them on her sides. "Where are you going?" Shi Mengwan blinked. Of course, it was to leave this place. "Mr. Zhang, this is my home." "I know this is your home. When you brought a strange man home, didn't you think about the consequences?" Seeing that Zhang Hao's face was getting closer and closer, Shi Mengwan pressed hard against his chest. "Mr. Zhang, sorry for the misunderstanding. She couldn't say the rest of her words. She just thought of him as her dear brother. She just replaced the past memories in front of her. However, the man in front of her did not know her and did not admit that he was her big brother. In short, it's all a misunderstanding. It's getting late and I still need to rest. Please go ahead." Zhang Hao's body blocked her way. Shi Mengwan didn't move, nor did she escape. She didn't want what happened in the elevator to happen again. "Mr. Zhang, can you make way?" Zhang Hao stared at Shi Mengwan's face for a long time, and finally stood up very slowly. Shi Mengwan didn't relax because he stood up. The other party was too tall. She was nearly 1.7 meters tall, and her sitting posture only made the other party look even taller. She didn't know that when her eyes stared at Zhang Hao's face with vigilance, there was an infinite flirtatious look in her eyes. The corners of her eyes were slightly raised, and there was a seductive air about her. But she was completely unaware of her own charms. Zhang Hao stood there, not in a hurry to leave, nor was he in a hurry to move. Shi Mengwan was a little nervous. She gulped. His eyes were filled with anticipation. Zhang Hao's eyes darkened at his eagerness to leave. Not only did he not leave, but he also leaned down. Shi Mengwan felt more and more nervous and leaned back. It was almost a silent invitation. Zhang Hao looked at her half-opened lips and stopped less than a centimeter away from her lips. Breathing hot, Shi Mengwan stared at the enlarged face in front of her and felt inexplicably thirsty. She subconsciously pursed her lips. Zhang Hao's face leaned closer, almost touching hers. "Miss Shi." Zhang Hao's voice sounded a little low. "If you don't intend to let a man do anything to you, don't casually bring a man home, and don't casually put on such a seductive posture." After saying this, Zhang Hao got up and left. The sound of the door closing brought Shi Mengwan back to her senses from the other party's words. After she came back to her senses, she was filled with anger. What did this Zhang Hao mean? What did he mean by casually bringing someone home? And what did he mean by casually putting on a seductive posture? Shi Mengwan wanted to curse, but the person who could make her curse had already left. She wanted to curse, but she didn't know where to start. Gritting her teeth, Shi Mengwan couldn't suppress her anger no matter what. She told herself that if she still cared about Zhang Hao next time, she would be a pig. She was so angry. When Zhang Hao entered the door, he found that the lights in the hall were shining. Chen Feifei sat on the sofa, and her expression wasn't particularly good. She kept a straight face until Jean Hauser entered the door. Chen Feifei's expression finally looked better. She stood up as if she was flying and quickly pounced in front of Jean Hauser. "Brother Hao, you're back." Chen Feifei's eyes were a little red. When she walked in front of Jean Hauser, she had already cleaned up the expression on her face. When he entered the door, he put on his suit jacket, and the wound on his hand was covered up. Chen Feifei didn't notice that when she pounced on him, she touched his wound. Jean Hauser's brows furrowed imperceptibly. He resisted the urge to pull Chen Feifei's hand away. "It's so late. Why aren't you sleeping yet?" "You still know that it's so late?" Chen Feifei pouted. "It's so late, and you still haven't come back. Don't you know that I'll be worried? Go to sleep." Jean Hauser's voice was considered gentle, but he didn't coax her like before. Chen Feifei was a little unhappy. "Brother Hao, where did you go?" "Nowhere. I'm just working overtime at the company." "I must tell Dad not to give you so much work. Look at you, you don't even have time to accompany me. Don't mess around." Jean Hauser's voice was a little serious. "Work is work, not play. If you don't want to say it, then I won't say it." Chen Feifei became more and more unhappy. "But you're always busy. You used to be willing to accompany me, but recently, you've been spending less and less time with me." Her tone was full of complaints. Jean Hauser looked at her, and his expression softened. "I'll accompany you after I'm done with my work." "You said it." Chen Feifei hooked his arm. "Don't lie to me. If you stand me up, I'll tell Dad." "What are you going to tell me?" The sudden voice made the two of them look at the stairs together. Chen Yongchang had come down at some point and looked at the two of them holding hands. When Chen Feifei saw her father, she quickly let go of her hand and ran towards Chen Yongchang. "Why aren't you sleeping yet?" "My precious daughter isn't sleeping. How can I sleep?" Chen Yongchang patted Chen Feifei's hand. "What's wrong? You haven't said what you want to tell me yet. Let me tell you, give Brother Hao less work. Look, he's so busy that he doesn't have time to accompany me." "Really?" Chen Yongchang glanced at Jean Hauser, then looked at Chen Feifei. "You're not young anymore. Don't be too willful. Hauser is someone who wants to do great things. How can he accompany you every day?" "I don't care. I just want Brother Hao to accompany me." It was rare for Chen Feifei to be willful. Her tone was full of coquettishness. Chen Yongchang couldn't do anything about this daughter. Good. But it's getting late now, you should go to sleep." Then, Chen Feifei looked at Jean Hauser, wanting him to send her back to her room. "Go to sleep first. I have something to discuss with Hauser." "Got it." Chen Feifei pouted, her face full of unhappiness. "Dad hates it the most. It's not enough for Brother Hao to help you during the day, but at night, you still want to snatch him from me." "Feifei," Chen Yongchang called her name. Chen Feifei was unhappy. She stomped her feet and went upstairs. A grown girl really can't be kept at home. Chen Yongchang looked at his daughter, glanced at Jean Hauser, and walked towards the study. Jean Hauser followed behind him silently. The study was on the first floor. Chen Yongchang entered the door and gestured for Jean Hauser to sit down. He didn't sit down, but stood opposite the desk. "It's been so many years, but you're still so polite." Chen Yongchang seemed to be lamenting. Jean Hauser didn't respond, and he didn't need his response. "There haven't been many things happening in the company recently. You came back so late today. Is there something wrong?" There was a hint of inquiry in Chen Yongchang's eyes. "It's nothing big." Jean Hauser's voice was very indifferent. "It's just a small matter. I've already taken care of it. I believe you know what to do." Chen Yongchang didn't continue this topic, but changed the topic. "That year, Feifei saved you and brought you back. It's been more than 10 years now. You know how Feifei feels about you. This child has been stubborn since she was young. She has decided on you, and as her father, I can't do anything about it. You're not young anymore. It's time to think about starting a family. Don't you think so?" Jean Hauser was silent and didn't respond. "The last time Feifei was hospitalized, you also promised me that you would marry her. Although her body is better now, she still has to be carefully nurtured. To be honest, I don't feel at ease handing her over to someone else. After so many years, I've seen your character. Hausa, I should be able to trust you, right? Jean Hausa pursed his lips slightly and finally nodded gently. I promised you that I would take care of her. Okay, it's getting late. You should go and rest first. You don't have to go to work tomorrow. Accompany Fei. Jean Hausa didn't refute. He nodded slightly and turned to leave. After returning to his room, Jean Hausa took off his suit jacket. There were still bloodstains on the shirt inside. He took it off and threw it into the trash can. His gaze was a little gloomy as he looked at the bandaged wound. Thinking of Qin Yongchang's words just now, he took out his phone. He pressed a set of numbers from memory. After the call was connected, he only said one sentence, I agree to what you said last time. After hanging up the phone, Jean Hausa deleted the call record. He made 2 more calls. Each time, he only said a few words and deleted the call record. After putting down the phone, he laid down on the bed. His tightly closed eyes covered up all his emotions. Shi Mengwan hung up the phone, but she still couldn't hide the shock in her heart. She had long known that Su Qingsang was the illegitimate daughter of the Su family. However, she didn't expect that Su Qingsang's mother would come knocking on her door one day. This was really amazing. Today, Su Qingsang called to ask her to go to dinner and meet Su Qingsang's mother. Shi Mengwan later met Xiang Kaiping, an auntie who looked quite kind and cute. Shi Mengwan liked her very much. When she saw her, she would think of her mother. Thinking of her mother, Shi Mengwan remembered that during the Mid-Autumn Festival, she was busy drawing and only stayed home for 2 days before returning to Lin City. Later, her mother called, and her words were full of disappointment. Perhaps she should choose a day to go back again. It was winter in Lin City, and the weather slowly turned cold. That day was designer Tong Yan's birthday. After Song's Seeking Studio got on track in the 2nd year, Shi Mengwan began to be busy alone. She hired 2 designers. One was Zhou Xinglei, and the other was Tong Yan. The 2 designers were a man and a woman. Neither of them was very experienced, but the design concept was very compatible with her. Tong Yan was 1 year younger than her, and today was her birthday. She didn't have a boyfriend yet, so in the past few years, she had been treating everyone to dinner to celebrate her birthday. At first, because Tong Yan didn't have a boyfriend, Shi Mengwan, as the boss, treated her to dinner to celebrate her birthday. Later, she simply turned the birthdays of the studio's staff into a gathering day. When it was time to get off work, Shi Mengwan brought her assistant Xiao Ji, secretary Xiao Qiu, and design assistant Shang Ji into her car. The other design assistant, Qing Jiang, followed Tong Yan into Zhou Xinglei's car. The 7 of them went to Chaowen Courtyard together. In the past, Shi Mengwan didn't spend so much money, but since Su Qingsang got married, Hua Jinyao often gave her all kinds of expense cards. In the past, Su Qingsang foolishly thought that their company had good benefits. Only now did she know that it wasn't good benefits. It was simply President Hua using all kinds of excuses to please his wife. Especially since Hua Jinyao's identity was known in Lin City, there were too many people who wanted to please Hua Jinyao. Many of the membership cards in her hands were given by Su Qingsang. It had to be said that the title of Mrs. Hua was very useful. Shi Mengwan brought her 6 employees into Chaowen Courtyard. The chefs here could cook specialties from all over the country. Although Shi Mengwan was from the south, her taste was heavy and she liked spicy food. She ordered 2 spicy dishes and left the rest to Tong Yan, the birthday girl. Halfway through the meal, Shi Mengwan received a call. She asked Xiao Qiu to take care of them while she went outside to get the cake. As a good boss, ordering a cake for her employees was also one of her considerate actions. The cake Shi Mengwan ordered was delivered to the hall of Chaowen Courtyard. She took the cake and was about to walk into the private room when she saw Jean Hausa's figure from the corner of her eye. She couldn't help but stop in her tracks. It had been almost a month since she last saw Jean Hausa. During this month, she tried her best not to think of Jean Hausa and that man. She kept hypnotizing herself and telling herself that that man was no longer her dear brother. He was a hooligan, a bastard. He liked to mock her and look down on her. However, she didn't expect to see Jean Hausa again when she was about to succeed. He was standing in the corridor with a woman standing beside him. That woman wasn't Chen Feifei, but someone else. When Mengwan was about to enter the private room, she saw the woman fall into Zhang Hao's arms, and Zhang Hao's arms were around her waist. That scene made Mengwan frown. She couldn't tell what she was feeling. Dear brother could probably only become a shadow in her memory. She turned around and entered her private room without looking back. What she didn't see was that after she left, Zhang Hao's hand had already left the woman's hand. I'm really sorry, President Zhang. Ling Shui steadied herself and slowly removed her hand from Zhang Hao's hand. The heels were too high and I couldn't stand firm. I almost bumped into President Zhang. It's okay. Zhang Hao was expressionless. Your father is still waiting for us in the private room. Miss Ling, please. President Zhang, you actually don't have to be so polite. Ling Shui nodded at Zhang Hao. Speaking of which, I'm about the same as President Zhang. You Miss Ling, come and go like this. Isn't that too polite? Why don't you call me by my name, Ling Shui? Ling Shui was pretty good looking. She was also very confident in her family background and appearance. At this moment, her gaze at Zhang Hao was naked and direct. She almost said it out loud, I'm interested in you as a man. Zhang Hao's expression didn't change. He took 2 steps forward and opened the door of the private room. Miss Ling, please. Ling Shui took a deep look at Zhang Hao and slowly entered the door. Ling Shui's father was the chairman of a company that worked with the Chen family. Recently, the 2 companies were discussing a cooperation project. Chen Yongchang's health hadn't been good these few days, so he handed this matter to Zhang Hao. Today was the day to sign the contract. Originally, after the contract was signed, it would be over. However, the other party was a business partner after all. Chen Yongchang asked Zhang Hao to do his part and treat the other party to a meal. The place was set at Chaowen Courtyard. Zhang Hao brought his secretary, Luexin, over. And Chairman Ling brought his daughter, Ling Shui. It was inevitable that they would have to drink at the dinner table. Zhang Hao's alcohol tolerance wasn't bad. This was also the reason why Chen Yongchang was at ease to let him come out to socialize. Luexin tried to block it, but Zhang Hao still had to drink the wine from Chairman Ling. After 3 rounds of drinking, Chairman Ling looked drunk. Brother Zhang, I really admire you. You're so young but you're so capable. Brother Yongchang is really lucky to have a talent like you. Chairman Ling, you're too polite. Zhang Hao didn't take such praise seriously. There wasn't much pride on his face. Chairman Ling was also someone who had been in the business world for many years. He really admired Zhang Hao, who didn't show his emotions and strive to be perfect in everything he did. He envied Chen Yongchang's good luck and couldn't help but look at Ling Shui again. Come Shui, let me toast Brother Zhang again. Ling Shui picked up her wine glass and toasted Zhang Hao. President Zhang. President Zhang, let me toast you. Zhang Hao didn't decline. He picked it up and drank. Ling Shui smiled. She glanced at Chairman Ling. Dad, I've already toasted you. Now it's your turn. Good. Chairman Ling raised his wine glass. Brother Zhang, let me toast you. I wish us a happy cooperation. Happy cooperation. Zhang Hao drank it in one gulp again. Luexin wanted to stop him, but he couldn't. Zhang Hao drank a lot. When he was about to leave, Chairman Ling stood up. Brother Zhang, I drank a little too much today. Do you mind letting your secretary send me home? I don't mind. Luexin didn't drink much today. Zhang Hao called him over so that he could send Chairman Ling and his daughter home after he got drunk. He watched as Chairman Ling left with Luexin. Zhang Hao stood up and planned to leave as well. However, the door of the private room was opened again. This time, Ling Shui came in. President Zhang, why aren't you leaving yet? Miss Ling. I dropped something. Come up and look for it. As Ling Shui spoke, she started to look for it in her original seat. Zhang Hao wasn't in a hurry to leave out of politeness. What are you looking for, Miss Ling? A necklace. Ling Shui pointed at her neck. I was wearing it just now. I don't know why it's gone now. Zhang Hao frowned slightly. Just as he was about to say goodbye, Ling Shui raised her head and looked at him. President Zhang, do you mind helping me look for it? I don't mind. At this time, Zhang Hao couldn't refuse. He was still working in Chen Yongchang's company, and the person in front of him was still his collaborator. He bent down and helped Ling Shui look for her necklace. The table in the private room was very big, and Ling Shui was beside Zhang Haoze. She was wearing a V-neck dress today. When she bent down, Zhang Haoze could see the scenery when she lowered her head. He turned his face away without any fluctuation, but Ling Shui exclaimed at this moment. As she spoke, she reached out her hand in his direction. As the two of them were squatting, Zhang Haoze didn't notice and was actually knocked to the ground by Ling Shui's suddenly approaching body. Ling Shui's hand reached behind Zhang Haoze. This way, she was almost sticking to Zhang Haoze's body. "I'm sorry, President Zhang." Ling Shui picked up the necklace. Zhang Haoze didn't say anything and waited for her to leave his arms. At this moment, Ling Shui took the opportunity to press on his body and pressed her hands against his chest. "President Zhang, how should I thank you for helping me find the necklace?" "You're welcome. Miss Ling, can you get up first?" Ling Shui didn't say anything. She lowered her head and was about to kiss Zhang Haoze's lips. Zhang Haoze avoided her, and Ling Shui's kiss landed on Zhang Haoze's face. Zhang Haoze frowned. Just as he was about to push Ling Shui away, he suddenly realized that something was wrong with his body. He felt the heat coming from little Yu Fu, and the waves of heat surged down. He suddenly looked at Ling Shui, his gaze sharp and cold like a knife. "President Zhang, you're so handsome." She had seen many handsome men, but she liked people like Zhang Haoze. He was abstinent, cold, and looked like he was 1,000 miles away. She liked this kind of man, and she liked this kind of style. She couldn't help but want to have a closer relationship with Zhang Haoze. Even if she couldn't marry him or be with him, it didn't matter. She only needed a one-night marriage. To her, having such a top-notch man was a bargain. Unfortunately, when they were talking about cooperation, no matter how she hinted, Zhang Haoze didn't seem to understand. Helpless, she could only think of another way. Today was the day the two families signed the contract. When she knew that Zhang Haoze had arranged a meal, she made an appointment with him in Chaowen Courtyard. Chapter 653. She had seen Chen Feifei before. She was a sickly person. She heard that she had heart disease and looked weak. She hated women like that the most. She felt that they were pretentious and fake. She was an ambitious woman. And Ling Shui never hid her ambition. "President Zhang, I've admired you since the first time I saw you." As she spoke, she reached into Zhang Haoze's clothes. Even if only a small part of his wheat-colored chest was exposed, it was enough to make her imagination run wild. Zhang Haoze's breathing became heavier. He finally understood that this woman had added something to the wine he had just drunk. "President Zhang." Ling Shui saw his face turn red. She leaned down, pressed her slender hand on his chest, and unbuttoned one of his buttons. "I really admire you. I'm very willing to have a chance to communicate with you further." As she spoke, she had already unbuttoned the second button of his shirt. Zhang Haoze held her hand at this moment. Ling Shui's eyes widened, but Zhang Haoze pushed her away and stood up. His movements were too fast, so fast that Ling Shui didn't have time to stop him. "You!" She only said one word before she saw Zhang Haoze's face turn red and he took 2 steps back. He looked down at Ling Shui's face. His breathing was a little heavy, but it couldn't hide the coldness in his eyes. "I appreciate Miss Ling's good intentions. I'll remember Miss Ling's appreciation for me. I still have something to do, so I'll leave first." His voice was a little low and a little hoarse. In fact, the medicine that Ling Shui had given him made his body heat up and he felt very uncomfortable. He used his greatest willpower to suppress the heat in his body. He quickly left the private room. After a short moment of surprise, Ling Shui quickly reacted. She stood up and wanted to chase after Zhang Haoze. However, she realized that Zhang Haoze could no longer be seen in the corridor outside. She stomped her feet in hatred. She knew that if she missed this opportunity today, she wouldn't have it again. She was angry, but there was nothing she could do. Now, she could only wait for the next chance to come again. After Shi Mengwan sent Tong Yan and the others away, she walked in the direction of her car. She didn't drink. She had always followed the habit of not drinking when driving, and not driving when drinking. Tong Yen and the others said that they were going to karaoke, but she wasn't interested. Although he was easy to talk to, he was still the boss. With her around, Tong Yen and the others would probably feel uncomfortable. She might as well promise them that she would pay for the expenses, but she wouldn't be going. After leaving Chaowen Courtyard, Shi Mengwan walked towards her car. It was night time in Chaowen Courtyard, and the parking area was a little dark. Passing through the greenery on both sides, the parking space around the corner was hers. However, his body was suddenly pulled into the bushes. The sudden change gave Shi Mengwan a fright. Her first reaction was to struggle, but as her body moved closer to him, she smelled the familiar scent of mint. The light was dim, but she could see clearly. The person in front of him was Jean Hauser. His reddened eyes in the dark, his slightly heavy breathing, and his hand that was tightly wrapped around her waist. You. She only had time to say the word, you, before she felt a warm sensation on her lips. What followed was an almost suffocating plunder. He was like a leopard that had bitten its prey. Once it was bitten, it refused to let go. Kiss fierce. Indulgence. It was as if it wanted to swallow her whole. This was Shi Mengwan's first kiss. She had never been kissed like this before. Or perhaps she had. When she was kissed, her consciousness became a little erratic. She remembered that this couldn't be considered her first kiss. Her first kiss was lost when she was 12 years old. The strength on her lips increased again. She felt pain and raised her foot to kick the other party's crotch. However, she neglected her current position. She was pulled over by the man, and her body was half nestled against his chest. She was pressed into his arms and kissed wantonly. The moment she raised her foot, her body lost balance and she got closer to him. It was like a branch that was entangled by a vine. They were intertwined. There was me in you and you in me. They couldn't tell each other apart. Shi Mengwan felt her body being hugged by him. She took a step back and leaned against the tree trunk beside her. She wasn't wearing thick clothes, and the cold and hard tree trunk made her feel uncomfortable. She struggled again. Just as the other party's hand was about to reach for the hem of her clothes, she couldn't help but raise her hand and slap the other party's face. She was a little angry, but more so resentful. What did he take her for? The humiliation from before. Today, it was a real bullying. She had just seen him cuddling with a woman, and now he was pestering her again. In the end, he had changed. He was no longer the person she remembered. Or could it be that he had just returned to his true nature, that he had always been a casual person? No matter which one it was, she didn't want to continue. The sound was especially clear in the night. The man's movements stopped for a moment. She was carried into the man's arms. The man's chin was pressed against the pit of her neck, and his breathing was heavier than before. Shi Mengwan smelled the smell of alcohol. She tried to push the other party. Strangely, this time, she actually succeeded. After pushing the other party away, she quickly ran to her car. The car door opened twice. She didn't know what she was nervous about. When she got into the car, Shi Mengwan realized that someone was sitting in the front passenger seat. Jean Hauser. His face was abnormally red. His breathing was heavy, and the smell of alcohol was strong. He seemed to be drunk. Shi Mengwan leaned her body towards the car door and stared at Jean Hauser with a face full of vigilance. Mr. Jean. Jean Hauser's voice was low and hoarse. He seemed to have seen Ling Shui come out. He didn't want her to see him in Shi Mengwan's car. President Jean? I said drive. Shi Mengwan gritted her teeth, stepped on the accelerator for the last time, and quickly left. The moment her car drove away, Ling Shui arrived at the parking lot and looked at Jean Hauser's car, which was still parked there. Jean Hauser hadn't left yet? That made sense. He drank alcohol and was drugged. The alcohol had triggered the drug, so it wouldn't be easy to get rid of it. He should still be in the villa. With this thought, Ling Shui went back to look for Jean Hauser. Shi Mengwan stopped the car halfway. She wanted Jean Hauser to get lost. She wanted to leave her car, but Jean Hauser didn't look right. His eyes were tightly shut, and he seemed to be very uncomfortable. Shi Mengwan's brows furrowed tightly. President Jean? Mr. Jean? Jean Hauser seemed to have heard her. He opened his eyes and glanced at her. Where's your house? Tell me the address. I'll send you back. The other party was her dear brother, the person she had always cared about and wanted to find. She didn't want to really leave him on the road. Jean Hauser didn't answer her question. Instead, he closed his eyes. Mr. Jean? Jean Hauser? Sure, Mengwan called out a few more times, but she didn't get a response. Helpless, she could only drive the car back to her home. When the car was parked, Sure Mengwan got out of the car first. She originally wanted to just leave Jean Hauser here. After thinking about it, she went around and opened the car door. Mr. Jean? Jean Hauser didn't move. Sure Mengwan gritted her teeth. Mr. Jean, can you get out of the car by yourself? Jean Hauser's eyes seemed to move. Sure Mengwan took a deep breath and bent down to look at him. Mr. Jean, can you hear me? Jean Hauser finally reacted. He opened his eyes. Sure Mengwan was shocked by his gaze. His eyes seemed to be even redder than before. Are you okay? Jean Hauser suddenly reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder. She almost went limp, but he got out of the car. Sure Mengwan instinctively supported his body. Most of his weight was on her. He was very heavy, and Sure Mengwan almost couldn't support him. Being so close to him, his body was full of the smell of alcohol, mixed with the faint smell of mint. Sure Mengwan closed the car door and looked up at him. Mr. Jean, can you stand steadily? Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes and didn't say anything. However, he almost carried her into the apartment. Sure Mengwan followed him helplessly and brought him upstairs. As soon as they entered, Sure Mengwan threw him on the sofa. During the short journey just now, she was covered in sweat. Jean Hauser lay on the sofa and didn't move. His face was even redder than before. There was a flash of worry in Sure Mengwan's eyes. But it was only for a moment. Soon, she didn't plan to care about Jean Hauser anymore. No matter how worried she was, it was useless. He had a fiancée and had forgotten about her. She turned around and went back to her room to change her clothes. She planned to take a shower and sleep. Today's torment was enough. After returning to her room, Sure Mengwan had just found her pajamas and took off her top. The door to the room was suddenly opened, and she was shocked. Before she could turn around, her body was already hugged by Jean Hauser. In front of her was the bed. Without thinking, he directly pressed her down on the bed. Mr. Jean. Her lips were blocked. It was the same domineering and predatory kiss as before. This time, she didn't even have a place to escape. Behind her was the bed. In front of her was his strong chest. Sure Mengwan struggled, but she wasn't Jean Hauser's match at all. Woo-woo. Jean Hauser, let go of me. But she couldn't make a sound. Other than the sound of clothes rubbing against each other, there was only the sound of cloth rubbing against each other. She was anxious. Jean Hauser didn't speak in the car just now because he had been suppressing the drug in his body. But in this environment, the entire room was filled with Sure Mengwan's faint aura. The drug seemed to be unable to be suppressed anymore. He kissed Sure Mengwan as if he was biting her. Sure Mengwan was in pain. The moment Jean Hauser's lips left her chin, she used all her strength to push him away. She quickly got up and wanted to run to the other side. But before she could run away, Jean Hauser pounced on her again. Sure Mengwan was anxious. She pressed her hands against his chest with all her might, forcing him to see her clearly. Jean Hauser? Jean Hauser, look clearly. Puma. I'm Sure Mengwan, not Chen Feifei. Look clearly. Jean Hauser's movements paused for a moment. Sure Mengwan took the opportunity to push his body away again. Jean Hauser, you have a girlfriend. Please calm down. She didn't know if he could listen to her, and she didn't know how much he could listen to, but she had to say it. Jean Hauser's body froze there, and he kept panting heavily. His eyes were red, and he seemed to be trying his best to control himself. Sure Mengwan saw that his hands were tightly clenched into fists, and his body looked very stiff. A trace of unconcealable worry flashed across her eyes. Jean Hauser? Jean Hauser glanced at her and didn't say anything. He stood up as if he was about to leave. However, his footsteps staggered at this moment, and he was about to fall. Sure Mengwan went forward to support him without thinking. Jean Hauser? Was he okay? Sher Mengwan finally realized that something was wrong with Jean Hauser. Not only was he drunk, but his skin was also boiling hot. Even through a layer of shirt, she could feel the heat of his skin. You're sick. Jean Hauser stared at Sher Mengwan's red lips that were open and closed and pushed her away forcefully. Jean Hauser? Sher Mengwan took 2 steps back. Thinking of Jean Hauser's actions just now, she seemed to understand something. Do you want to wash your face? She went forward to support Jean Hauser. This time, he didn't push her away. He hugged her tightly and kept rubbing against her body. Sher Mengwan half supported and half dragged him towards the bathroom. Her house wasn't big. She was also a person who didn't care about anything when she was busy. There was only a shower in the bathroom, but no bathtub. She helped Jean Hauser stand under the shower. Do you want to take a cold shower? She read the book as if it would be better this way, although she didn't know if it was true. As she spoke, Jean Hauser had already turned on the water. Sher Mengwan was caught off guard and was drenched. She had always cherished her body. She never took a cold shower or drank cold water. Suddenly being drenched like this, she couldn't stay any longer. She let go of Jean Hauser and quickly left. The sound of water behind her continued, but she didn't want to care anymore. When she returned to her room, she took her pajamas and hurried to another guest bathroom to take a shower. At this time, she had to be glad that she didn't connect the guest bathroom to the main bathroom and turn it into a big bathroom. When she came out, she found that the sound of water in the bathroom was still there. She frowned slightly. She wanted to go in and take a look, but she was afraid that Jean Hauser's symptoms were still there. After thinking about it, she decided not to care anymore. But this was her room, and the sound of water coming from the bathroom made it impossible for her to fall asleep. She turned around and went to the study. When she sat down, she realized that she wasn't in the mood to draw. She thought of her first kiss. When she was 12 years old, she lost her first kiss. At that time, she had been living with her dear brother for almost half a year. Dear brother was very good to her and took care of her. But he often had a cold face. No, he seemed to have a cold face to everyone. Even if he cared about her, he often said it with a cold face. That time, not long after the Spring Festival, it was the Lantern Festival. Southerners had to eat glutinous rice balls during the Lantern Festival. She used to live in the countryside, so these habits were well preserved. On the day before the Lantern Festival, she casually said that tomorrow was the Lantern Festival and she wanted to eat glutinous rice balls. The next day, dear brother really brought glutinous rice balls back. She was overjoyed, but that glutinous rice ball was so small. Is this glutinous rice ball? Why is it so small? She looked at the 2 bowls of glutinous rice balls and then at dear brother. Dear brother nodded heavily and told her that this was glutinous rice ball. It was fine if she ate it, but it was fine if she didn't. Each place had its own customs. Sher Mengwan thought that perhaps in Lin City, glutinous rice balls were so small. She didn't know that dear brother didn't buy any glutinous rice balls at all, but fermented rice balls. How old was she at that time? She was 12 years old. The little bit of alcohol in it was enough to make her drunk. Moreover, the one that dear brother bought had a strong smell of alcohol. However, the 2 children didn't notice it at that time. Dear brother, you're so good looking. He was the best-looking person she had ever seen. Dear brother also ate that, and his face was a little red. The youth had never drunk alcohol before, and the alcohol in it was enough to make him a little drunk. He looked at the girl in front of him. The 12-year-old girl had already begun to develop. In half a year, her body had grown a little taller. Her figure was slender and her facial features were beautiful. Especially those eyes, which seemed to be able to speak. The youth suddenly felt a little hot. After the first month, he was already 16 years old. He was a big boy. You're very beautiful too. The voice of the youth, who was approaching the end of his voice change period, wasn't as unpleasant to hear as it was at the beginning. Sher Mengwan blinked and looked at dear brother. No, you're even better looking. As she spoke, she sat beside the youth. Her small hand gently caressed the youth's facial features. Dear brother, your eyebrows are beautiful, your nose is beautiful, your eyes are beautiful, and your face is beautiful. Her hand landed on his lips. She blinked, and her voice was a little drunk. Your mouth is also beautiful. The youth felt even hotter than before. The girl in front of him had bright eyes, white teeth, and skin like porcelain. He caught her hand and turned it to stroke her face. Wanwan is also beautiful. Her eyes are beautiful, her face is beautiful, and her mouth is also beautiful. He was imitating her words. Shi Mengwan blinked and suddenly smiled. You missed my nose. Is my nose not beautiful? The youth was very willing to coax her. Moreover, this was the truth. My Wanwan is beautiful in every way. Shi Mengwan smiled. Her smile made the small and shabby room seem to have suddenly become bright. The youth looked at Shi Mengwan's bright red lips in front of him. He couldn't help but lean over and gently kiss her lips. Their eyes met. The youth looked at the girl's clear eyes, and the girl looked at the youth's raised eyebrows. The youth suddenly realized what he had done and quickly retreated. The tips of his ears were dyed red without a trace. Half of it was because he was shy, and the other half was because he blamed himself. What was he doing just now? He actually kissed her. She was only 12 years old. Even after the new year, she would only be 13 years old. The girl didn't realize that she had been taken advantage of. She leaned over and held the youth's face. Dear brother, your mouth is so sweet. He had just eaten the wine-fermented meatballs, so his lips naturally had the taste of the wine-fermented meatballs. She wanted to eat it again, so she leaned over and took the initiative to press her lips against the youth's. It was a young and clumsy kiss. It was both the youth and the girl's first time. After the kiss, the girl felt satisfied. Under the influence of alcohol, she went back to her room and fell into a deep sleep. She didn't know that because of her kiss, the youth had an extremely shameful and absurd dream at night. She also didn't know that the youth, who had always been lazy, woke up early the next morning and hurriedly washed his clothes. He even changed the bedsheets. Shi Mengwan only knew that when she woke up the next day, she still remembered the kiss from yesterday. She blushed a little, but she felt happy. That person was her dear brother. From that moment on, a seed was planted in the girl's extremely secretive thoughts. She liked her dear brother, so she naturally didn't hate this kiss. But from the next day, her dear brother started to avoid her. He would avoid her sight, avoid her contact, and Shi Mengwan thought that her dear brother hated her and felt that she was frivolous. Yes, which good girl would run away from home at the age of 12 or 13? What kind of good girl would live with a half-grown boy? And which good girl would take the initiative to kiss a boy? All the education she had received since she was young told her that these things were wrong and wrong. She blamed herself, felt guilty, and felt ashamed. She felt that she had done something wrong. She shouldn't have taken the initiative to kiss her dear brother. Her dear brother probably hated her too. For those few days, she was extremely sad. In the end, she couldn't help but wake up early one day when the youth was about to go out and block the youth's path. Bang! She seemed to hear something coming from the bathroom next door. Shi Mengwan's thoughts were pulled back by that sound. She hurriedly got up and returned to her room. She hesitated for a moment. Listening to the sound of water inside, she resolutely went in. The shower head had fallen off at some point. Jean Houses sat on the ground. His clothes were messy and all of them had been torn off by him. His body was abnormally red. His breathing was so heavy that she could easily hear it. She could even see Jean House's tent that was set up high. He seemed to be very uncomfortable. He was constantly fighting with himself, but he didn't seem to succeed. The scene in front of her was really too special. Shi Mengwan's face was a little red, but she was more worried. She went forward and looked at Jean House with obvious concern. Jean House? Jean House? She first turned off the shower head that was still spraying water at the wall. She bent down to help Jean House up. Jean House leaned against the wall with his eyes half closed. When he heard Shi Mengwan's voice, he opened his eyes. Shi Mengwan happened to bend down at this moment. She was shocked when she met Jean House's eyes. It was a pair of wolf-like eyes. Fierce, violent, sinister, and deep. Shi Mengwan's body instinctively retreated, but it was already too late. Jean House pulled her into his arms and kissed her accurately. Shi Mengwan didn't even have time to let out a low cry before she was kissed speechless by Jean Hauser. His body had been drenched in cold water for so long, but not only did his temperature not drop, it became even hotter and hotter than before. He was sitting on the ground, so Shi Mengwan maintained a rather uncomfortable posture. She felt very uncomfortable and wanted him to let go of her. But how could Jean Hauser let her go? He easily picked her up and completely imprisoned her in his arms. Shi Mengwan tried to push him, but this time, she failed. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't escape Jean Hauser's hands. More importantly, she was at a complete disadvantage at this moment. She was only wearing pajamas, and the thin fabric was easily lifted by Jean Hauser. He felt that it was troublesome, so he tore her clothes into pieces without any hesitation. Woo-woo. Chapter 654. Shi Mengwan was struggling with life and death. No matter what, she had to fight for a chance for herself. Even if he couldn't escape in the end, Jean Hauser had completely lost his mind. He still wanted to do something to her. She also wanted an experience that was relatively more respectful to her. It wasn't that he didn't feel conflicted. But now, he could only accept his fate. She was the one who brought him back. She was the one who gave him this chance. If she was destined to be unable to escape tonight, then she hoped that her first time would be in bed, not here, in a situation like this. Jean Hauser was still kissing her neck, but when he heard her words, he paused. In the next second, she was easily picked up by him. He walked very quickly, as if he was in a hurry. She was tightly held in his arms, her body pressed against his chest. She looked up at him. His gaze was slightly different from before. There were a few more flickering flames inside. Her back touched the bed, followed by his rather heavy weight for her. She didn't close her eyes. Instead, she looked at Jean Hauser's eagerness and domineering actions. Her heart trembled. Big brother. Jean Hauser became even more eager to plunder the girl's body. The corner of her lips started to feel numb and painful from his kiss. She reached out her hand to support his face and looked at him attentively. This face overlapped with that of Big Brother when he was a teenager. They had the same eyebrows and the same eyes, but the person in front of him had lost the youthfulness of his youth and was now more stable and mature. However, there was one thing that didn't change. His eyes were always sharp, like a lone wolf on the grassland. This face, these eyebrows, these eyes. She had thought about it countless times in her dreams. This was her big brother. He was the big brother who had been with her for more than a year. Shi Mengwan's eyes were burning. Big brother, please be gentle. At this moment, she didn't want to care about Jean Hauser's identity. She didn't want to care about the woman beside him. She didn't want to care about the humiliation he had suffered. The face in front of her overlapped with that of her big brother from back then. Jean Hauser was Big Brother, and Big Brother was Jean Hauser. From the first time she saw him, she was sure of this. Big brother, Wan, please be gentler. She spoke very softly. She couldn't even guarantee that the other party would listen. But she had to say it. This was her first time, and the man on top of her was the big brother that she had been longing for so long. She had never wanted to be with another man in her life. If she was destined to have a man, she wanted her first time to be with her big brother. His lips were sealed once more, but this time, it was less urgent than before. There was a hint of gentleness in his tone. The man was trying his best to control himself. Ling Shui's move was extremely ruthless. There was no way he could resist the effects of alcohol and drugs. Perhaps there was a trace of clarity, but that trace of clarity disappeared when Shi Mengwan called him dear brother. The woman's eyes were like silk, and her body was soft. Her eyes were filled with gentleness. The flames that he had been restraining and suppressing just now were now completely ignited. Everything that happened after that was out of their control. Shi Mengwan's reality and memories were mixed together. Jean Hauser and her dear brother had become one person. It was as if she had returned to the time when she was 12 years old. That arrogant and cold youth, but he treated her differently. Their skin was close, and their breaths were in harmony. She was like a cloud, floating up, down, and up with the wind. She floated beyond the clouds of the ninth heaven, unable to find a place to return to. However, she was also like a ship that had been floating on the sea. Now, she had found a place to return to. Dear brother. Dear brother. The moment she experienced the pain, she almost wanted to cry. She hugged him tightly and felt what he gave her. The man's breathing became even heavier. She was broken into pieces and was no longer complete. However, he filled her up and finally returned to being complete. Back and forth, it kept repeating. This night was exceptionally long. Sure, Mengwan didn't sleep for long. She was a person who couldn't sleep easily when she had something on her mind. At dawn, she opened her eyes. Looking at the sky that was about to brighten, she turned over. Her body was extremely uncomfortable and uncomfortable. It was as if her entire body had been disassembled. She followed the hand that was tightly wrapped around her waist and raised her eyes to look at the owner of the hand. Jean Hauser had fallen asleep. His eyes were tightly closed. It seemed to be because of the intense exercise, but it also seemed to be because of the alcohol last night. His breathing was steady and long, and his chest rose and fell slightly. His face was no longer as red as it was yesterday. When he fell asleep, he didn't have the sinister aura that he had when he was awake. He looked completely harmless. She wanted to raise her hand and touch his face. Just such a simple action made her feel difficult. She wanted to sleep, but she couldn't. She felt tired when she got up. Seeing that the sky outside was getting brighter, Sure Mengwan finally decided to continue sleeping for a while. She turned around. Jean Hauser's hand was still wrapped around her waist. Because of her movements, the blanket slid to her waist. Because of this, Sure Mengwan also saw a scar on his left arm. That scar looked like it had been a long time ago, and the color was already very faint. His skin color was slightly pale. Therefore, this scar looked especially obvious. Yesterday, Sure Mengwan didn't have time to think, nor did she have time to seriously look at Jean Hauser's body. The sky was getting brighter, and the scar was getting clearer and clearer. It was about 5 centimeters long. Sure Mengwan raised her hand and gently caressed the spot. Her eyes suddenly felt a little sore. She had always believed that Jean Hauser was her dear brother. Now, this injury had completely confirmed her guess. Dear brother. When Sure Mengwan woke up in the morning, the young man was still sleeping. He had fought yesterday and suffered some injuries. Although they were all superficial wounds, his age also consumed a lot of vitality. Looking at the young man lying motionless on the bed, Sure Mengwan thought about the dozens of yuan she had given him yesterday. That money wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. She regretted coming out for a day. She just wanted to go back to her home now. But there was a problem now. Without money, how was she going to go home? Sure Mengwan was already 12 years old. She thought about it and decided to go straight to the police station and find a police officer to send her home. Before she left, she was a little hesitant. Should she tell Jean Hauser? However, she wasn't familiar with him. It was just that she stayed here for a day yesterday. She said that she was borrowing him, but she even gave him money. Sure Mengwan didn't feel guilty at all when she thought about it. She took a look at the small house and finally left. Sure Mengwan had a good idea. She just needed to find the nearest police station. However, after she came out of the young man's house, she found that she was lost. The bungalows in this area were almost the same, and the alleys were connected in all directions. Every door looked almost the same to her. Sure Mengwan went around for a long time, but not only did she not get out, she even got lost. Just as Sure Mengwan was about to find a public phone to stop and call the police, a voice suddenly rang out. She actually met the 2 people who had been following her yesterday. 2 hooligans stood in front of Sure Mengwan. One was wearing a flowery shirt, and the other was wearing a black shirt. The man in the black shirt took a step forward and glanced at Sure Mengwan's face. Isn't this the little beauty from yesterday? The 2 of them had their eyes on Sure Mengwan yesterday. Such a young girl with good looks looked like she was alone and didn't have any family by her side. If they sold her, they would make a lot of money. Little beauty, since we met, it's fate. Come with your brothers. Sure Mengwan panicked when she saw these 2 people. She was lucky to escape yesterday, but it didn't mean that she would be so lucky today. Looking left and right, she ran back like she was flying. The two hooligans looked at each other and quickly followed behind her. Sure, Mengwan wasn't familiar with this area, and she was being chased in a hurry. In her panic, she actually ran into a dead end. Little beauty, you can't run anymore, right? The man in the black shirt looked at Sure Mengwan, and the smile on his face became more and more vulgar. Don't run anymore. Follow your brother. Get lost. Sure Mengwan was anxious. She looked at the two people, then looked at the dead end in front of her, and fell into great despair. Seeing that the two hooligans were about to approach, she looked around in panic. Finally, she picked up a stone on the ground and held it in her hand, looking like she wanted to fight the two hooligans to the death. Little girl, you have character. Your brother likes you. The man in the flowery shirt glanced at the man in the black shirt, and the two of them moved forward together. Sure Mengwan waved the stone in her hand randomly. However, before she could hit the two of them, her hand was already grabbed by the two hooligans. Little beauty, let's go. Help, help. Sure Mengwan cried out. Seeing this, the man in the flowery shirt covered Sure Mengwan's mouth. Woo-woo. Sure Mengwan was anxious. Regret once again occupied her heart. She shouldn't have run away from home. The two hooligans dragged her out and were about to run out when the figure of a youth suddenly appeared in front of them. When Sure Mengwan saw the person, her eyes widened. It was him? That dear brother? The youth stood at the entrance of the alley. His gaze swept across the two hooligans, then he looked at Sure Mengwan. His eyes seemed to be filled with displeasure. Brat, don't be a busybody. The man in the flowery shirt glared at the youth and was quite rude. The youth stood there without moving or speaking. The two hooligans didn't take him seriously either, especially when they saw the injuries on the youth's face, not only on his face, but also on his arms. They didn't take the youth seriously even more. When they passed by the youth with Sure Mengwan in tow, the youth didn't move. Sure Mengwan's mouth was blocked. She could only watch as the youth kept making whimpering sounds. The two hooligans didn't take the youth seriously and passed by him just like that. Unexpectedly, when they walked behind the youth suddenly turned around. He flew up and kicked the back of the man in the flowery shirt. The man in the flowery shirt was originally covering Sure Mengwan's mouth, but this sudden kick caught him off guard. The man in the flowery shirt was caught off guard. He let go of Sure Mengwan and his body fell forward. Without waiting for the man in the flowery shirt to get up, the youth kicked the man in the black shirt again. The man in the black shirt was on guard after the man in the flowery shirt fell. The youth didn't succeed. He wasn't annoyed. He waved his hand at the man in the black shirt and punched him. His fists were hurried, quick, and ruthless. The man in the black shirt wasn't prepared for this and was hit head-on. Brat, you're courting death. The man in the black shirt rushed towards the youth. At the same time, the youth pulled Sure Mengwan away and faced the two hooligans. Sure Mengwan didn't know the youth's name. She watched the youth fight 1 against 2 and thought of the scene where he was surrounded and beaten up by a group of people yesterday. Be careful. After she shouted, she remembered that she didn't seem to know the youth's name. Seeing that the man in the flowery shirt also stood up and rushed towards the youth, she panicked. Dear brother, be careful. The word, dear brother, made the youth look at her. Before the man in the flowery shirt's fist swept over, he quickly threw a punch at the other party. The young man's martial arts were all developed through punches and kicks in actual combat. The two hooligans couldn't take advantage of him for a moment. The man in the black shirt was anxious. When the man in the flowery shirt was holding the youth back, he took out a knife from his pocket. However, he didn't point it at the youth, but at Sure Mengwan. Sure Mengwan was stunned. She didn't expect such a sudden turn of events. Before she could react, the youth saw the man in the black shirt's actions and pounced in Sure Mengwan's direction. He hugged her tightly and tried to dodge the knife from the man in the black shirt. However, his arm was still stabbed by the man in the black shirt. Blood gushed out. The bright red blood stimulated the youth. There was still a knife in his arm, but it was as if he didn't care about his life. He pulled out the knife and rushed towards the two hooligans. Such a reckless move scared the two hooligans. The two of them actually fled in panic and didn't continue to tangle with him. Dear brother, are you okay? Sure Mengwan went forward and looked at the youth's bleeding arm. What should we do? You're bleeding a lot. Shut up. The youth glared at her and casually tore off his shirt and wrapped it around his arm. You have to go to the doctor like this. Dear brother, I'll send you to the doctor. Go to the doctor? The youth turned around and looked at Shi Mengwan. There seemed to be a hint of mockery on his face. Do you have money on you? Shi Mengwan bit her lip and was speechless for a moment. However, the youth just covered his bleeding arm and walked forward. Shi Mengwan didn't want to go home anymore. The other party had saved her, so she followed behind him worriedly. The young man turned into another alley, and there was an extremely small clinic there. The youth entered the door. There was a middle-aged man wearing a white coat inside. When he saw the youth enter and looked at the injuries on the youth's body, his expression immediately turned ugly. Why did you fight again? Do you want to die? The youth didn't say anything. He just pulled open the wound and showed it to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man stood up and looked at the youth's injury. It's a little serious. Although it didn't hurt the bones, it still needs stitches. But I don't have any anesthesia here. If you don't have it, then you don't have it. Cut the crap. You're quite capable. The middle-aged man was angry. After the youth sat down, he didn't give him any anesthesia and directly treated the youth's wound. When he was cleaning the wound, the youth's expression began to turn rather ugly. When the needle that was about to be stitched into the youth's flesh, the youth's entire body began to tremble. Dear brother? Shi Mengwan wasn't an idiot. She had read The Romance of the Three Kingdoms and heard that Guan Gong scraped bones to treat wounds. However, the person in front of her wasn't Guan Gong. He was just a youth who looked 15 or 16 years old. Dear brother? Are you okay? She couldn't help but glare at the doctor. You gave him anesthesia. Little girl, don't disturb me. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that the stitches will go smoothly. The middle-aged man didn't even raise his head. He just focused on stitching the wound. Don't worry, a few stitches will be enough. He won't die. But... Shi Mengwan looked at the youth worriedly. His fists were clenched tightly, and large drops of sweat fell from his face. Shi Mengwan couldn't help but hold his wrist. He was injured because of her, and it was also because of her that he became like this. Dear brother, the doctor stitched the wound and was still in the mood to joke. Kid, when did you get to know a girl? She doesn't look like you. Shut up. The youth's voice was really unpleasant to hear at this moment. He glared coldly at the middle-aged man, then looked at Shi Mengwan. She held his wrist, looking as if it was more painful than him. Inexplicably, he felt that the wound on his arm didn't seem to hurt so much anymore. The wound was finally stitched up and treated. The middle-aged man retracted his hand and looked at the youth's face. Alright, I won't say much. You've always had your own ideas. But I still have to remind you that your wound hasn't come into contact with water these few days, and you haven't carried heavy objects. Most importantly, for the sake of your life, you'd better not fight with others anymore. Got it? You're so long-winded. The youth stood up and moved his arm. Indeed, his bones weren't injured. It was just a flesh wound. He didn't care, nor did he thank him. He directly left the small clinic. Dear brother? Shi Mengwan quickly followed behind the youth. The youth's footsteps weren't fast, so she easily caught up to him. Thank you for today, thank you. You're welcome. We're just even. The youth glanced at Shi Mengwan. Although Shi Mengwan was young, she understood what he meant at this moment. She helped the youth yesterday, and he helped her today. However, Shi Mengwan felt that this was different. If it weren't for the youth today, she would have been taken away by those two hooligans. She really didn't dare to think about what kind of fate she would have had. We're not even. Dear brother, you saved me. Thank you. She said it very sincerely, but the youth completely ignored her. He walked straight to his home. Shi Mengwan followed behind him. At this moment, she wasn't in the mood to think about going home. Instead, she was thinking about the doctor's words. The wound couldn't touch water, nor could it carry heavy objects. Dear brother was only one person, and he saved her. She couldn't be ungrateful. Even if she wanted to go home, she would think about it in a few days. With this thought in mind, Shi Mengwan followed behind the youth. Dear brother, what's your name? Dear brother, you were really amazing just now. Dear brother, that doctor is too bad. He actually didn't give you anesthesia. Dear brother, does your wound still hurt? Dear brother, what's your surname? Dear brother, my name is Shermengwan. You can call me Wanwan. That's what my mother calls me. Dear brother, shut up. The youth, who had been followed and questioned all the way, stopped and glared at Shermengwan. If you keep making noise, I'll beat you up. As he spoke, he raised his hand, as if he really wanted to hit her. Shermengwan stood still. Her eyes were clear and pure. She believed him without a trace of fear. The youth felt defeated. He glanced at Shermengwan, turned around, and continued walking forward. Dear brother? After entering the door, Shermengwan wanted to speak, but the youth suddenly stopped and stood in front of her. He was much taller than her. He stared at her face with a fierce gaze. Listen, you can stay, but you have to follow my rules. What rules? It wasn't like she wanted to stay. She just wanted to take care of him for a few days until his wound healed. The rule is to shut up. When I don't let you speak, you're not allowed to speak. Big. Also, you're not allowed to call me dear brother. But, my name is Xiao Zhe. You can call me Ah Zhe. Xiao Zhe's voice sounded very fierce. Shermengwan bit her lip and looked at his eyes. She said timidly, but I think dear brother sounds better. Xiao Zhe glared at Shermengwan. His uninjured right hand clenched into a fist again. Shermengwan's gaze was too calm. He raised his hand and put it down again. Okay, since you call me dear brother, then go wash my clothes. Shermengwan didn't expect Xiao Zhe to really let her stay. She nodded. I'll help you wash your clothes. Anyway, when she was at home, she helped her family wash their clothes. She didn't think that this was a difficult situation. Instead, she felt that this was an opportunity to repay Xiao Zhe for saving her life. Xiao Zhe watched as Shermengwan walked into the bathroom in a few steps. When she really went to wash his clothes, his gaze became a little complicated. Just like that, Shermengwan stayed at Xiao Zhe's house. Shermengwan caressed the scar on Zhan Hao's arm. This scar was left behind to save her. Seeing this, she no longer had to doubt, nor did she have to look for it. Zhan Hao was dear brother, and dear brother was Zhan Hao. But why didn't Zhan Hao remember her at all? Could it be that she was the only one who held on to that memory of the past, but dear brother had completely forgotten about it? The hand that was originally pressing on Zhan Hao's scar was grabbed by someone. The person who was originally asleep had woken up at some point in time. At this moment, he was staring at her with his eyes open. Because he had just woken up, Zhan Hao's gaze was calm at this moment. His eyes were deep, but there was no trace of hostility. Shermengwan could even see a faint sense of peace in his gaze. Their eyes met, and there was silence. Shermengwan looked at him and was the first to look away. You're awake? After asking a useless question, Shermengwan lowered her eyes uncomfortably. It was one thing to be prepared yesterday, but it was another to have sex. In the end, she was still a little shy. She didn't even dare to look into his eyes. Zhan Hao didn't say anything, but she couldn't help but say, dear brother. When these three words came out, Zhan Hao's expression changed slightly. Shermengwan lowered her head, but she didn't notice the change in his expression at all. Dear brother, are you all right now? His appearance yesterday made her a little worried. She cared about him so much that she even forgot the discomfort on her body. Dear brother, how are you now? More than 10 years of concern, more than 10 years of searching. Shermengwan, who had never given up and never gave up. Not getting a response from Zhan Hao, she couldn't help but look up at him. Chapter 655. Being stared at like this, Shermengwan's exposed shoulder skin was inexplicably stained with a layer of coldness. She shrank her shoulders and looked at Zhan Hao with uncertainty. Big brother? Zhan Hao turned over and pressed her under his body. He looked down at her face. Dear brother? He raised his hand and gently pinched her chin. Who are you calling? Big brother? He was very heavy, and Shermengwan couldn't breathe under his weight. I'm calling you. Aren't you my dear brother? Sure, Mengwan didn't understand. She didn't know why he didn't remember her and didn't recognize her. However, that scar, as well as his appearance, had long since been engraved in her heart, and she had never forgotten it. Big brother, have you forgotten? I'm Wanwan. Jean Houses stared at her face. He moved closer and looked into her eyes. He exerted a little force in his hand. So, you thought I was someone else's substitute yesterday? What substitute? Sure, Mengwan was stunned for a moment and couldn't come back to her senses for a moment. After realizing what Jean Hausa meant, she shook her head quickly. No, big brother, I didn't think of you as someone else. She only knew that the person in front of her was the big brother that she had been thinking about. But why didn't he admit it? He clearly was, yet he refused to admit it. He had forgotten her. He had forgotten everything that had ever existed between them. He felt hurt and a little anxious. They were already like this. She wanted to refresh his memory, to make him remember that they used to be. Big brother. Look at me. I'm Sure Mengwan. You're Wanwan. He pinched his lower jaw. Jean Hausa looked at her face, and his voice was as cold as the ice in December. So, you like to play this kind of game? This isn't a game. I'm not treating you like someone else. He was the big brother, not someone else. You didn't treat me as someone else? Jean Hausa sneered. Did she think he would believe her? Then who is the big brother you're calling? It's you. Sure Mengwan looked at him with a firm gaze. The dear brother I'm calling is you. You're my big brother. Teeth. She felt pain on her lips. He had bitten her. Sure Mengwan blinked at him. Dear brother. She couldn't speak the rest of her voice, because Jean Hausa had already kissed her lips. I'm not your big brother. Don't call me that. Big. Sure Mengwan's big word was swallowed up again. This time, Jean Hausa bit harder than before. I'll say it again, don't call me dear brother. Sure Mengwan bit her lip and looked at Jean Hausa. Her expression changed from anticipation to disappointment, from determination to confusion. For a moment, she even suspected that she was wrong. Jean Hausa's arm was on her side, and the scar was clear. Sure Mengwan didn't know why he didn't recognize her, nor did she know why he forgot. However, she had indeed developed a lot of negative emotions because of his forgetfulness. He was naked and she could feel the heat of his skin. That kind of temperature made her lose her mind again. Big brother? Jean Hausa didn't stand on ceremony with her this time. The devouring tongue and lips robbed her of her breath. His big hand reached under the blanket. Soon, Sure Mengwan couldn't call him dear brother anymore. The effects of alcohol and drugs, and Sure Mengwan treating him as another man, made him angry. He robbed her of everything without any hesitation. In the end, Sure Mengwan could only let out broken words. Under his attack, she was utterly defeated. Chen Feifei threw the cup in her hand on the ground, her face full of anger. She glared at the maid in front of her with a gloomy look in her eyes. What do you mean? What do you mean, brother? How didn't come back yesterday? You better explain yourself clearly. The maid shivered. Chen Feifei's temper was completely unleashed on them. Miss, young Master Jean really didn't come back yesterday. There was no one in his room. Of course, Chen Feifei knew that there was no one in Jean Hausa's room. But she didn't give up. She only thought that Jean Hausa had gone out early. Jean Hausa had the habit of morning exercise. He had to get up every morning and take a step. She thought that he had gone for a run. Ask Xiaochen to drive the car over. I'm going out. Chen Feifei knew how to drive, but her health wasn't good, so her family was worried. For his daughter's convenience, Qin Yongchang assigned her a driver. Yes. Before Chen Feifei went out, she called Qin Yongchang and asked him what Jean Hausa's arrangements were yesterday. Qin Yongchang didn't know what his precious daughter was going to do, but he still told her about Jean Hausa's whereabouts yesterday. After asking, Qin Feifei went straight to the company. The Qin Corporation was also very famous in Lin City. Qin Yongchang started out in the aquaculture business. Later, he saw an opportunity. He started investing in real estate. He was also lucky and encountered a good opportunity. For a few years, his business was very big. He also had his own business in the neighboring city. In the past few years, with Jean House's participation, he listened to his words and began to expand into other industries. Now, the company was also quite large. Chen Feifei's car stopped at the company building. Everyone in the company knew Chen Feifei and knew that this young miss couldn't be offended. The front desk came out early in the morning and led the way for Chen Feifei. Chen Feifei went upstairs in an imposing manner and went straight to Jean House's office. However, Jean House wasn't in the office. This made Chen Feifei's expression even uglier. She started to call Jean House continuously. Jean House was woken up by the ringing of his phone. He didn't pick up the phone. Instead, he turned off the phone. When he got up, he looked at the unfamiliar environment in front of him and remembered where he was. Under the blanket, he couldn't find anything. He looked at Shi Mengwan, who was sleeping beside him. The woman's blanket barely covered her chest. The skin on her shoulder that wasn't covered by the blanket was covered with bruises. Jean House rarely lost control. No, it could be said that he had never lost control before. But last night he lost control. Ling Shui's drug was indeed powerful. Mixed with alcohol, although it was quite difficult for him to resist, it wasn't really impossible for him to resist. But he lost control. Jean House rubbed the space between his eyebrows. His expression didn't look good. His gaze fell on Shi Mengwan's face. She was still sleeping very soundly. There was a faint green under her eyes, and her face was slightly pale. Jean House's expression became even uglier. His loss of control was mostly because of this woman's smell. He rubbed the space between his eyebrows and quickly got up. When he found his wet clothes in the bathroom, his phone rang again. He looked at the phone on it and picked it up. "Drive the car to a Yuan apartment and pick me up." "All right, help me bring a set of clothes over. I need them both inside and out." After hanging up the phone, Jean House took a shower. When he came out of the bathroom, he only had a bath towel around his waist. Shi Mengwan was still sleeping and didn't show any signs of waking up. He stood by the bed and stared at her face for a long time. When there was a knock on the door, he left the room. The person standing outside the door was Tang Hua, his personal assistant. He didn't have any doubts about Jean House appearing in an unfamiliar place. He just handed the bag in his hand to Jean House. From the inside to the outside, there were shoes and clothes. Jean House turned around, pulled off the bath towel, and began to change his clothes. "Young Master Jean, Miss has been looking for you since she woke up. She seems to have gone to the company now." Young Master Jean, yesterday? Tang Hua wasn't a talkative person, but there were some things that he was indeed very concerned about. "That woman, Ling Shui, drugged me." Jean House put on his clothes and turned to look at Tang Hua. "I'll leave the Ling family to you. I don't want to see this company again in the business world." "Yes." Tang Hua had always obeyed Jean House's orders. Jean House had already tidied himself up. He looked at Tang Hua. "Let's go to the company first." "Yes." Tang Hua followed Jean House and the two of them left together. The moment the door closed, Jean House looked in the direction of the room, but quickly looked away. Coincidentally, Shi Mengwan's apartment was very close to the company. Before going upstairs, Jean House instructed Tang Hua a few things. A flash of surprise flashed across Tang Hua's eyes, but it was only for a moment. He quickly lowered his head. "I got it. Go." He was very relieved to leave the matter to Tang Hua. Tang Hua drove the car away, and Jean House entered the company hall. As soon as he entered, Secretary Lexen came over. "General Manager Jean. Miss is throwing a tantrum upstairs." "Look, I got it. Go to your work. Find the contract from yesterday and let Secretary Zhao file it." When Jean House entered the door, Chen Feifei was sitting behind his desk, sulking. "Brother Hao." When she saw Jean House, even though Chen Feifei tried her best to control it, she still couldn't hide the anger on her face. "Yes. Why are you here at the company?" "Brother Hao." His calm appearance made Chen Feifei even angrier. However, the angrier she was, the more aggrieved she looked. "Brother Hao, where did you go yesterday? Why didn't you go home?" She spoke with extreme resentment. Even though she was already furious, she didn't want her sweetheart to see her bad side. In fact, When Jean Hauze was in university, he made a sum of money by speculating in stocks and futures. Then, he bought a house near the university town. For a period of time, he used the excuse that he was busy with his studies and company matters. He didn't want to travel back and forth and lived in his apartment. However, Chen Feifei refused. She said that if Jean Hauze wanted to live in the apartment, she would follow him. Later, Chen Yongchang had no choice but to buy the apartment opposite Jean Hauze. However, Chen Feifei's health wasn't good, so she couldn't be alone. No matter how big the apartment was, it wasn't as comfortable as home. Chen Yongchang loved his daughter. He had no choice but to beg Jean Hauze to agree to move back home. In the end, Jean Hauze took a step back, but asked to wait until he graduated from university. This request wasn't too much. Chen Yongchang had no choice but to agree. After Jean Hauze graduated from university, he entered Chen Yongchang's company. He moved back to the Chen family. He would occasionally go to the apartment for 2 days. But every time, it would make Chen Feifei unhappy. I was too busy last night, so I slept in the apartment. Brother Hao, is what you said true? Chen Feifei looked like she was about to cry. Why did you lie to me? You didn't come back yesterday, so I asked the cleaning auntie to go to the apartment to take a look. You didn't go back at all yesterday. The apartment was cleaned regularly, and the person who arranged it was Chen Feifei. Jean Hauze looked at her with an unclear expression. The angrier she was, the more aggrieved she looked. The angrier she was, the more aggrieved she looked. Her eyes were red, and with her current expression, she looked weak and frail. Brother Hao, you actually lied to me? You never lied to me before. Do you not care about me anymore? You didn't go home at all yesterday, and you weren't in the apartment. Brother Hao, I'm not checking on you. I'm just concerned about you. Don't you know how worried I was about you when you didn't go home? I really didn't go home yesterday. Jean Hauze looked at Chen Feifei's face. He thought of Ling Shui. Brother Hao. Chen Feifei stopped complaining and looked at him with red eyes. However, there's a reason. Jean Hauze walked to the sofa and sat down. He lowered his eyes and looked at the financial magazine on the coffee table. Chen Feifei didn't say anything. She just looked at him with concern. Yesterday, your dad asked me to sign a contract with Chairman Ling. I know. I asked Dad. Chen Feifei was angry in her heart, but she looked understanding on her face. I know that you've worked hard for the company over the past few years. But, do you have to sign the contract all night? She pouted and her eyes were still red as she looked at Jean Hauze. Such a delicate beauty, in front of a man, showed such complete trust, and was also full of gratitude. If it was another man, he would probably want to hold Chen Feifei in his arms and comfort her. Feifei, I didn't sign the contract all night, but something happened yesterday. Jean Hauze raised his head and looked at Chen Feifei with a complicated expression. Something happened yesterday. What happened? Can you tell me? Chairman Ling's daughter, Ling Shui, was also there yesterday. She's very interested in me. What did you say? Chen Feifei stood up and looked at Jean Hauze. She realized that she had lost control. She sat down in front of Jean Hauze again and regained her worried expression. Doesn't she know about my relationship with you? She knows, but I think she doesn't care, right? But Chen Feifei almost twisted her fingers, but she forced herself to put on a victim's expression. Brother Hao, you're mine. Don't tell me you like that Shui? I don't like her, but I did do something wrong to you yesterday. Brother Hao. Chen Feifei almost couldn't sit still. Jean Hauze seemed to be a little helpless. She drugged me yesterday, and I drank some wine. Brother Hao. Chen Feifei's expression completely changed. She sat there with a pale face, as if she would collapse at any moment. What do you mean? Feifei, I'm sorry. Jean Hauze didn't say anything else. What else did Chen Feifei not understand? You heard, you guys? You guys really? Really? Chen Feifei's face was pale, and she looked like she had been hit. Jean Hauze lowered his head, looking like he didn't want to say anything more. Chen Feifei reached out and hugged Jean Hauze tightly. Brother Hao, it's okay. It's okay. I know you didn't do it on purpose. You couldn't help it. I won't blame you. If she wanted to blame someone, Blame that damn woman. Chen Feifei raised her head and looked at Zhang Haoze. Brother Hao, don't worry. I'm really not angry. I'll tell Dad to arrange less work for you in the future. Even if you want to talk about cooperation with others, I'll tell him to arrange more people for you. Feifei, there's no need. Not everyone is like Ling Shui. Of course, not everyone was as shameless as that woman. Chen Feifei was so angry that her gums started to hurt. Holding Zhang Haoze's arm, her voice was very soft. Brother Hao, thank you. You're enduring it for me. I won't take this matter to heart, and I won't be angry. Don't worry. Okay. Zhang Haoze nodded and didn't intend to continue this topic. You came here so early. Did you have breakfast? I didn't eat. You didn't come back all night. How could I be in the mood to have breakfast? I'll get someone to bring breakfast in. You can eat first. Chen Feifei nodded and wasn't in a hurry to leave. After eating with Zhang Haoze and telling him not to work too hard, she got up and left. However, she didn't go home as she had told Zhang Haoze just now. Instead, she went around to Qin Yongchang's office. Damn woman, damn Ling Shui, she dared to steal her man. She wanted to teach her a lesson. After Chen Feifei left, Zhang Haoze's face didn't have the same expression as before. He stood up expressionlessly and walked to the back of his desk to sit down. It would take some time for Tang Hua to swallow Ling's company. Before that, he would leave a small role like Ling Shui to Chen Feifei. After all, he was very clear about Chen Feifei's combat strength after all these years. Chen Feifei thought that she had disguised herself very well in front of him, but she didn't know that no matter how she disguised herself, her true nature would still be revealed. After dealing with Chen Feifei and Ling Shui, Zhang Haoze was in a good mood. The moment he opened the file, Shi Mingwan's sleeping face suddenly flashed across his mind. She was exhausted yesterday. At this time, she should still be sleeping, right? Zhang Haoze, who realized what he was thinking, had an ugly expression on his face. He retracted his thoughts and focused all his attention on work. When Shi Mingwan woke up, it was already past afternoon. The room was empty, and there was no sound at all. Zhang Haoze had already left. Shi Mingwan bit her lip and turned over. This simple action made her entire body feel uncomfortable. She felt a little wronged and a little disappointed. Zhang Haoze ran away just like that after having sex with her. He didn't care at all. It was her first time. This realization made her uncomfortable. Not only her body, but also her heart. Her heart felt even more uncomfortable. Dear brother didn't acknowledge her and forgot about her. Now, he treated her like an antidote, throwing her away after using her. All of this filled Shi Mingwan with disappointment. Her disappointment didn't last for long. After realizing what time it was, Shi Mingwan quickly got up to look for her phone. Her phone was left in the study next door yesterday. Sure enough, there were at least dozens of missed calls from morning until now. Most of them were from colleagues in the studio, and one was from Su Qingsang. She was still feeling very uncomfortable, so she didn't plan to go out today. She told Xiao Ji that she was sick and wasn't feeling well. She wanted to rest at home for 2 days. If there was anything, she could email her or call her. She called Su Qingsang again. She asked her to go to her place for dinner. After telling her that there was an event at the company, Shi Mingwan hung up the phone. She went to the kitchen and casually cooked a bowl of noodles for herself. She was still feeling uncomfortable, so she went back to sleep after taking a shower. Shi Mingwan, who was sleeping, once again dreamed of the winter when she was 12 years old. It rarely snowed in Lin City, but the winter here was still considered cold. They lived in that small bungalow. There was no heating, air conditioning, or heater. There was only one blanket in Xiao Zhe's house. It turned out that during the summer, Shi Mingwan, who slept on the sofa, was covered with a blanket. Now that the weather was cold, she couldn't cover herself with a blanket. Shi Mingwan was woken up by the cold for several nights. Then she could only wrap herself tightly with the blanket, but it was useless. On the 3rd night, Xiao Zhe woke up. He looked at Shi Mingwan and told her to sleep on the bed. Dear brother, I'll sleep on the bed. Are you going to sleep on the sofa? At that time, Shi Mingwan was still very naive. However, Xiao Zhe was only a teenager. Compared to her, the The sofa was even smaller for him. He couldn't even stretch his feet straight when he slept on it. Shi Mengwan took the initiative to speak after seeing how Qiao Zhe slept. "Are you going to sleep?" Shi Mengwan was really afraid of the cold. At that time, it was already past the Mid-Autumn Festival of the lunar calendar. It would be even colder later on. She didn't want to be cold. However, she didn't expect that when she slept on the bed, Qiao Zhe would also sleep on the bed. At first, Shi Mengwan was a little awkward and uncomfortable, but after sleeping for 2 days, she was completely at ease. The youth's gaze was calm, and Shi Mengwan's gaze was clear. One treated the other as a sister, and the other as a brother. The pure friendship between siblings wouldn't have any bad thoughts. Shi Mengwan dreamed of the first night Zhe slept with her. She still remembered that she was still a little embarrassed. She went to bed early and curled up on one side of the bed, occupying a very small space. However, dear brother slept in the middle of the bed rather rudely. At that time, he really didn't sleep well. Sometimes, when he fell asleep, he would squeeze over to her side. At this time, Shi Mengwan could only move out more and more carefully. She also had to be careful not to fall under the bed. Later, the knocking on the door woke Shi Mengwan up from her dream. She was very tired and sleepy. She was woken up by someone and didn't want to get up to open the door. However, the knocking on the door didn't seem to give up. It was still going on. Shi Mengwan had no choice but to get up, put on a coat, and open the door. Unexpectedly, the person standing outside was actually Zhan Haoze. Zhan Haoze looked at Shi Mengwan. After sleeping for a day, her face had recovered a little, but it still didn't look good. He entered the door silently. His attitude was as comfortable as if he was returning to his own home. Zhan Haoze. He didn't like to call her dear brother, so she wouldn't call him that. But what did he mean now? Didn't he leave? Didn't he only treat her as the antidote? Since that was the case, then why did he come back? Chapter 656. Zhan Haoze entered the door and walked to the sofa to sit down. His relaxed expression made Shi Mengwan feel a little unhappy, as if he treated this place as his home. Didn't he leave? Since he left, why did he come back? While she was unhappy, she felt a little expectant. Did Zhan Haoze remember what happened in the past? Or, she pursed her lips, took a few steps forward, and stood by the coffee table. She didn't sit down. She just stood there and looked at him. Zhan Haoze was tall. Even if he was sitting, he wasn't much different from Shi Mengwan, who was standing. The two of them looked at each other like this. "You." Shi Mengwan tried her best to control her emotions and not let herself show even a trace of happiness. In fact, compared to Zhan Haoze disappearing without a trace, his appearance now made her feel more or less comforted. "What's the matter?" Shi Mengwan's tone sounded a little cold. Zhan Haoze narrowed his eyes slightly. She had probably just woken up, and her hair was a little messy. She was wearing a black sports coat and a set of pink pajamas inside. The nondescript combination gave her a sense of laziness. The V-neck of the pajamas made him see the snow-white skin at a glance. There were still purplish-red hickeys on it. He could easily remember how he had left marks on her body yesterday. The memories of last night made Zhan Haoze a little stiff. Next month, his tense face looked a little solemn. His gaze returned to Shi Mengwan's face, and he took out a box from his pocket. He placed it on the coffee table and pushed it forward. "Eat it." Shi Mengwan didn't see what it was at first, but after she saw it clearly, her expression suddenly changed. On the coffee table, the word "Yuding" was written on the box, which deeply stimulated Shi Mengwan's nerves. Zhan Haoze, she stood there, feeling a chill in her hands and feet. Yesterday, she and he had slept together like a pair of mandarin ducks, but today he had given her this. "I should thank you for your thoughtfulness now, shouldn't I?" Last night was just an accident. She hadn't had time to recover from the fact that she had a relationship with Zhan Haoze. His actions today were like a basin of cold water that was poured over her head. She really hadn't thought about children. It was too far away for her. Moreover, to Zhan Haoze, she might just be an irrelevant passerby. He had lost his head last night, and he thought of her as an antidote. No matter which one it was, she really didn't think about the child and even forgot to take precautions. Jean Hauze didn't say anything. Shi Mengwan stood there and felt her hands and feet gradually regain some warmth. She took a step forward and picked up the box of medicine. Sorry to trouble you, I'll take the medicine. I'll eat later. You can go. Jean Hauze didn't move, and Shi Mengwan didn't want to be entangled with him. Yesterday was a dream come true. She kept thinking about her dear brother and finally had a chance to interact with him. Even if this kind of interaction was just a one-sided dream. Today, Jean Hauze would let her know that if this was a dream, it could only be a nightmare. She couldn't tolerate it, she couldn't let it go, and she couldn't accept that her big brother had become like this. Mr. Jean, please. Jean Hauze looked at her face, as if he didn't understand what she was angry about. He stood up and walked in front of her. His gaze fell on the box in her hand. Are you angry? Shi Mengwan stood there without moving. There was a hint of stubbornness in her expression. She was very beautiful, with a delicate beauty, and her stubborn expression at this moment. Her red lips were slightly opened, and she refused to give in to him. Her eyes were full of momentum. Jean Hauze turned his face slightly, and his body involuntarily took half a step forward. He stared at the arrogance on her face. Didn't you say to take the medicine? Shi Mengwan suddenly looked at him. For a moment, her eyes were indescribably complicated. She gritted her teeth and clenched her fists, which were hanging by her side. She glared at Jean Hauze and quickly turned around to go to the kitchen. When she came out of the kitchen, there was a glass of water in her hand. She opened the medicine in front of Jean Hauze. She took out a pill and was about to put it in her mouth when Jean Hauze suddenly held her hand. Shi Mengwan's hand stopped in midair. She looked at Jean Hauze with confusion and mockery. What are you doing, Mr. Jean? Jean Hauze slowly took the pill from her hand. He leaned over and looked at Shi Mengwan's face. He placed the pill and the glass of water back on the coffee table. Mr. Jean, this medicine will have an effect if it's taken within 72 hours. And then? Jean Hauze pulled Shi Mengwan's body into his arms. If that's the case, then don't waste this time. Shi Mengwan quickly understood what he meant. He carried her in his arms and carried her to the room. Shi Mengwan's expression changed drastically when she realized what he wanted to do. Jean Hauze, are you crazy? He didn't love her. Yesterday was an accident. Did he still want to continue today? Jean Hauze, put me down. The distance from the living room to the room was too short. Shi Mengwan felt that in less than 10 seconds, she had already been placed on the bed by Jean Hauze. The moment her body touched the bed, she quickly bounced up and wanted to leave from under Jean Hauze. However, she was once again pressed under Jean Hauze's body. As she got up, he restrained her hands. At the same time, he kissed her lips. Woo-woo. Shi Mengwan couldn't say the rest of her words. Her body still had the feeling he gave her yesterday. Her back was sore and her legs were weak. She wasn't his match at all. Her coat was taken off and thrown on the ground. The thin pajamas inside weren't an obstacle to Jean Hauze at all. He easily tore the pajamas into pieces. Shi Mengwan was like a peeled egg. She appeared in front of him without any cover at all. This also made it much easier for Jean Hauze. He could see the marks on her body more clearly. Her skin was very good. Her body was very delicate and white. The more it was like this, the more obvious the marks that hadn't faded became. Those marks were left by him. Jean Hauze. Shi Mengwan didn't want to continue with him. She struggled to get up, but he easily suppressed her with one hand. He kissed her lips again, not giving her a chance to make a sound, nor did he give her a chance to resist. Everything had just begun. Shi Mengwan washed her clothes and tidied up Qiao Zhe's 2 extremely small rooms. Finally, she went to the kitchen and looked at the things in the kitchen. Yes, there was an electric rice cooker, a pot, and even a pressure cooker. The pots, bowls, ladles, and pots were all complete. There were also daily necessities, rice, oil, and salt. Shi Mengwan tidied up the kitchen, came out of the kitchen, and went to look for Qiao Zhe. Dear brother? Unexpectedly, she saw Qiao Zhe changing his clothes. She let out an ah and quickly turned around. The young man's shirt was covered in blood. He had no choice in the small clinic just now. Now that he was out, he naturally had to change. He still had to go out at night. The young man's body was slender, so there was nothing to look at. However, Shi Mingwan was still a little girl, so she naturally felt embarrassed. "What are you screaming for?" Qiao Zhe impatiently buttoned 2 buttons on his shirt and walked in front of Shi Mingwan. "Haven't you seen it before?" It wasn't that she hadn't seen it before. When she was at home, her father and a few uncles would also be bare-chested. However, those were her family. And Qiao Zhe, "Why did you call me?" Shi Mingwan realized that he was already dressed, so she only dared to look up at him. The young man had recovered quite well. Yesterday, his face was bruised and swollen, but today, his injuries had healed a lot. She pursed her lips and told him about her discovery. "I just realized that there's rice in the kitchen. Look, it's not healthy for you to eat outside. Why don't we buy some vegetables and cook at home?" Of course, Qiao Zhe knew that there was rice and oil at home, but the problem was, do you know how to cook? She was the eldest daughter in the family. When her mother was pregnant, she was the one who helped with the chores. Every day when she came home from school, she had to cook for her parents. The young man glanced at Shi Mingwan and suddenly sneered. "Buy vegetables? Where did you get the money?" "Didn't I yesterday?" Shi Mingwan's words were interrupted by the young man. "You mean your dozens of yuan? I just paid the medical fees." Shi Mingwan let out an ah. She didn't remember seeing the young man pay, but since he said he paid, then he paid. At this moment, the young man suddenly approached Shi Mingwan with an evil smile on his face. "Why don't I sell you? That way, I'll have money to buy vegetables." Shi Mingwan was shocked by his sudden approach, but she shook her head firmly. "You won't sell me. You're not me. How do you know I won't? I know anyway. You just won't." After Shi Mingwan said this, she lowered her head. She wasn't in the mood to argue with Qiao Zhe now. If there's no vegetables, then there's no vegetables. Then let's eat plain rice. I'll do it. After paying the medical fees, she had no money to buy vegetables, so she could only eat plain rice. Shi Mingwan entered the kitchen, but she began to feel a little conflicted. Dear brother was still injured, so he should eat better. But in this situation, he couldn't even eat vegetables. How could she give dear brother nutrition? Perhaps she should think of a way to earn money? When Shi Mingwan washed the rice, she began to be a little lost in thought. What could she do? She was only 12 years old, so she definitely wouldn't be able to find a job. Perhaps she could start collecting trash tomorrow? But that wasn't good either. She wasn't familiar with this place. These alleys were full of twists and turns, so she wouldn't be able to recognize them all without some time. Why don't I tell dear brother? Let him bring her along? If he wasn't willing, then she would think of another way. She washed the rice and put it into the rice cooker. She measured the water and plugged it in. When the rice was ready, Shi Mingwan leaned against the kitchen stove in a daze. In the past, her parents would occasionally give her pocket money at home. At that time, she still felt that she didn't have much use for money. If she had known earlier, she would have taken more money when she ran away from home. Now it was all right. She heard the sound of the door closing and came out of the kitchen. She found that Qiao Zhe had returned at some point in time. He was holding 2 bags in his hand. When did you go out?" Shi Mingwan didn't see him go out at all. Why did he come in from outside now? "Go cook." The youth handed the bag in his hand to Shi Mingwan. Shi Mingwan looked at the vegetables inside. There were potatoes, tomatoes, vegetables, eggs, and meat. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough for 2 people. Where did you get the money? Didn't he say that he had no money just now? Cut the crap. Didn't you say that you know how to cook? Go quickly. Shi Mingwan nodded and took the vegetables into the kitchen. Her cooking skills weren't good, but she was used to doing housework, so she moved quickly. In less than an hour, 3 dishes and a soup were ready. After she finished, she realized that she seemed to have cooked a little too much. There were only the 2 of them eating, so why would they need so much? However, what happened next exceeded her expectations. Not only did the youth eat all the dishes she cooked, But he also finished the rice she cooked for 2 people in the rice cooker. The way he wolfed down the food made Shi Mengwan wonder if this person hadn't eaten for a few days. After eating, Shi Mengwan could tell that the youth was in a good mood. This also meant that she could stay here. Shi Mengwan washed the dishes and tidied up the kitchen. She thought that Xiao Zhe was actually quite a good person. He had saved her and taken her in. When Shi Mengwan was about to take a shower at night, she finally realized the problem. She originally thought that she could go home today, so she wore this outfit yesterday. She could barely sleep on the sofa with her clothes on. But today, she was caught by those 2 hooligans and ran so far away. Her body was even stained with Xiao Zhe's blood. Her clothes were so dirty that she couldn't wear them anymore, but there were no clothes she could wear here. Shi Mengwan thought about it and went to look for Xiao Zhe. "Dear brother, do you have any extra clothes?" Xiao Zhe was taller than her, so he definitely didn't have any clothes she could wear. But she still wanted to ask. "A t-shirt will do. Any clothes will do." After eating, the youth was busy in his room. When he heard her words, he glanced at her. He had noticed just now that the clothes on the girl's body were stained with his blood. He went to the closet, found a t-shirt and threw it to her. The youth was taller than her, and the t-shirt was also longer. Shi Mengwan took the shirt and thought that it could be used as pajamas. She went to the bathroom to take a shower, then changed her clothes and washed them. In the end, when she put on the long t-shirt and was about to go out, she found a problem. She didn't have any underwear inside, so it felt strange. She stayed in the bathroom for a long time, not knowing how to get out. Perhaps she could trouble Xiao Zhe again? Ask him to buy a set of underwear for her? Someone knocked on the bathroom door a few times, and Xiao Zhe's voice sounded outside the door. "Did you die inside? Come out, I want to brush my teeth." No matter how embarrassed Shi Mengwan was, she had no choice but to come out. When she met Xiao Zhe's seemingly dissatisfied gaze, she shrunk her neck in the basin with the washed clothes in her hand. "I also washed the clothes." Xiao Zhe didn't look at her, but went into the bathroom. Shi Mengwan heaved a sigh of relief and took the clothes to the small balcony to dry them. She felt uncomfortable while she was drying the clothes. She blocked Xiao Zhe a few times and wanted him to make another trip, but she couldn't open her mouth. In the end, she could only pull down the t-shirt with all her might and sit on the sofa, not daring to move. When Xiao Zhe came out and was about to leave, he saw Shi Mengwan like a primary school student. Her legs weren't tight, and her hands were placed on her knees without moving. "You're going out." Seeing that Xiao Zhe was about to leave, Shi Mengwan immediately stood up. However, when she realized what she was wearing, she took a step back. "Dear brother, are you going out now?" "Yes, what's the matter?" Although it was very late, he still had something to do. "Then, when you come back, can you help me bring some clothes back?" "Bring clothes?" The youth glared at her, and his tone was exactly the same as when she asked him to buy groceries just now. "Do you have money?" Money was Shi Mengwan's weakness. She bit her lip and shook her head. The youth snorted and turned around to leave. Shi Mengwan was anxious and grabbed his hand without thinking. Then even if I don't have money to buy clothes, can you buy me a set of underwear?" When Shi Mengwan said the last 2 words, her voice was so soft that it was almost like a mosquito buzzing. Of course, Xiao Zhe didn't hear her clearly. "Buy what?" "Underwear." Shi Mengwan said it again. Her face was almost red to the base of her neck, and she was very embarrassed. The youth's gaze swept across Shi Mengwan's body. His thin t-shirt covered Shi Mengwan's body, and it looked a little awkward for a small person to wear an adult's clothes. The young girl had already begun to develop. The 2 places in front of her body weren't full of waves, but they were slightly bulging. The youth's gaze looked down, but it was only for a moment before he quickly retracted it. "You sleep first." The youth glanced at her. "I'm going out for a while. We'll talk about it when I come back." "Okay." Shi Mengwan was indeed embarrassed. The dirty clothes had already been washed, and she had no clothes to wear now. She didn't dare to run out just like that, but she wasn't used to it being empty like it was now. In the end, Xiao Zhe left without looking back. After he left, Shi Mengwan carefully closed the door and sat down on the sofa. She seemed to have thought of a problem at this moment. Dear brother ran out just like that. It was so late, where would there be clothes to sell? Shi Mengwan fell asleep when she was in a daze from waiting. By the time she woke up, it was already dawn the next day. When she heard the sound of the door opening, she quickly sat up from the sofa. Qiao Zhe entered the door from the outside. This time, he was carrying a big bag in his hand. When Shi Mengwan was sleeping just now, her clothes almost rolled up to her thighs. Now that Qiao Zhe was back, she hurriedly straightened the hem of her clothes and pulled them up. Dear brother, Qiao Zhe wasn't a patient person. He directly threw the bag into her arms. The bag was a little heavy. Shi Mengwan instinctively caught it, hugged it, and looked inside the bag. When she opened it, there were clothes and underwear. She took it out and took a look. The clothes were the simplest jeans and t-shirt. This is for me? What else? Could he wear it? Thank you, dear brother. Shi Mengwan hugged the clothes, her eyes filled with gratitude. However, dear brother, it seemed that he was really nice. Go change. Qiao Zhe glanced at her. As for the one you're wearing, I'll use it as your pajamas. Thank you, dear brother. Shi Mengwan was extremely happy. Not only because dear brother bought her clothes, but also because dear brother was stubborn but soft-hearted. He said that he wouldn't care about her, but he still did. Dear brother was so nice. Sister Shi, how about we order the takeout from the restaurant you mentioned last time? Sister Shi? Yes. Shi Mengwan came back to her senses and found that Xiao Qiu was staring at her with a puzzled gaze. Shi Mengwan sat up straight. What did you say? I said, how about we order the takeout from the restaurant you mentioned last time? Didn't you say that you were tired of the previous ones? Shi Mengwan didn't object. You decide. Then I'll go order. Xiao Qiu looked at Shi Mengwan and didn't ask further. However, before she left, her gaze swept across the design drawing in front of Shi Mengwan. Shi Mengwan naturally noticed her gaze. She looked at the design drawing, picked it up, and tore it up without hesitation. After tearing it up, she supported her forehead with one hand and half closed her eyes. She thought of Zhang Haoze again. When she woke up this morning, Zhang Haoze was no longer in the house. If it weren't for the glass of water and the box of birth control pills on the coffee table, Shi Mengwan would have thought that yesterday was her fantasy again. Zhang Haoze, Qiao Zhe. These two people only had one word in their names, and they looked the same. But the way they did things was completely different. Dear brother was stubborn but soft-hearted. No matter what, he would protect her and take care of her. But what about Zhang Haoze? What kind of person did he think she was? He came and went as he pleased? She didn't see Zhang Haoze this morning, and this was the second time. Shi Mengwan couldn't help but feel a little wronged. What did Zhang Haoze mean? For the next half a month, Shi Mengwan didn't see Zhang Haoze again. After the Mid-Autumn Festival in Lin City, the weather began to cool down. It was December. Shi Mengwan's studio also began to get busy. At the end of every year, major companies would have many annual meetings. Often at this time, the orders would increase. Not only were there engagement dresses, but there were also many people who came to make dresses. Many people came in advance to prepare. Shi Mengwan became busy and didn't think too much about Zhang Haoze. Occasionally, in the dead of night, she would think about what that person was doing. But soon, this kind of mood would be replaced by busyness. This kind of busyness continued until the end of December. As the wife of the president of Tianyu Group, Su Qingsang also had to attend the annual meeting of Tianyu Group. Her dress was prepared by Shi Mengwan. On the day of the meeting, Shi Mengwan also attended. 1-1. When Shi Mengwan entered the door, Su Qingsang walked towards her. You're here? Yes. I have to see a lot of people today. I might not be able to take care of you. Take care of yourself later. Call me if you need anything. Don't worry, I'm not a child. I need you to take care of me wherever I go. Shi Mengwan really didn't need Su Qingsang to take care of her. She walked to the long dining table to get a drink. Her gaze fell on Su Qingsang. She might not even know it, but ever since she married Hu Jinyao, her temperament had begun to change. A hint of envy appeared in her eyes. Whether Hu Jinyao was the president or an employee, he was really good to Su Qingsang. Shi Mengwan casually took a drink and took a sip, only to realize that she was drinking wine. However, this wine tasted good, so she simply drank up the whole glass. The moment she put down the glass, she saw Jean House's figure from afar. Chapter 657. Chen Feifei looked at Jean House eagerly. There was obvious affection. She hooked her hand around Jean House's arm, looking very intimate. "Brother Hao, I didn't expect President Hua to be the president of Tianyu Group. He looks so young." "Yes," Jean House replied. He wasn't too surprised. He had dealt with Hua Jinyao before. Also, he is so good to his wife. Chen Feifei looked in Su Qingsang's direction, and she couldn't help but feel a bit envious. Who wouldn't envy a woman like Su Qingsang? To have a man like Hua Jinyao, who was not only rich and handsome, but also good to her. Jean Houze didn't reply. Chen Feifei couldn't help but stand in front of him. "Brother Hao, when we get married in the future, you will treat me like President Hua treats his wife, right?" Jean Houze pursed his thin lips and did not respond to Chen Feifei's words. Chen Feifei's eyes were filled with disappointment, but she forced herself to smile. "Brother Hao, you'll always take care of me, right?" Jean Houze responded softly, and his voice was a little perfunctory. Chen Feifei was not annoyed. Jean Houze had always been like this. If she wanted to be angry, she would have been angered to death. Anyway, she believed that she and Jean Houze had been together for more than 10 years. This was something that no one could compare to. "Brother Hao, I saw Miss Luo and Miss Song. Let's go and say hello." The Chen family had business dealings with both the Luo and Song families, and she also wanted to bring Jean Houze to them. "Go ahead. I'm going to the bathroom." "Then go quickly and come back quickly. You know, when you're not around, I feel like I've lost my soul." Jean Houze didn't respond to Chen Feifei's words. He took her hand away from his and went to the bathroom. Chen Feifei pursed her lips into a straight line. In a place where Jean Houze couldn't see, there was a flash of gloominess in her eyes. She had spent a month fighting with Ling Shui. The conditions of the Ling family were similar to her family. Speaking of which, she could be considered a difficult woman to deal with. However, it was a pity that Ling Shui loved to play around. Relying on her good family background, she did not put men in her eyes. It was too easy to find dirt on such a woman. Chen Feifei spent a lot of effort to find Ling Shui's weakness. She was sure that Ling Shui was in a terrible fix now, and it was impossible for her to have the time to pester Jean Houze anymore. Jean Houze should have time to accompany her without that woman's entanglement, but he had become very cold to her recently. When she asked, he said he was busy with work. In fact, the company was really busy recently. In this way, she couldn't even lose her temper. He didn't even want to bring her to the banquet tonight. If she hadn't happened to see the invitation in his office, she wouldn't have known. Chen Feifei was a little annoyed, but she would not show all her negative emotions in front of Jean Houze. Curling up the corners of her lips, she walked towards the group of socialites with a perfect smile. She was the eldest daughter of the Chen family. She had to maintain her most appropriate side at all times. Shi Mengwan had already put down her wine glass when she saw Jean Houze. She tried to look as if she hadn't noticed, but her action of putting down the glass was a little forceful. For more than half a month, Jean Houze never appeared again. She treated those 2 nights as a dream. During this period of time, she constantly convinced herself that it was just a dream. She had already started to let go, but she saw such a scene again. She had heard from Su Qingsang that Jean Houze had a fiancé. She also remembered seeing Jean Houze and Chen Feifei together. At that time, the two of them didn't have a real relationship, and she wasn't 100% sure that the other party was Qiao Zhe. But now, she couldn't bear to watch any longer. She walked away from the table and headed for the bathroom. After leaving the banquet hall, Shi Mengwan's phone rang. It was a call from home. She took the phone and walked to the corner at the end of the corridor to answer it. The stairwell was right next to it, and it was far away from the elevator, so there was no need to worry about people coming over. Her mother asked her if she would go home on New Year's Day. Shi Mengwan didn't give a precise answer. There were many things to do at the end of the year. She really couldn't guarantee that she would have the time to go back. Your sister misses you very much. She's asked about you several times. He said he wanted to go to Lin City to see you. Shi Mingru was Shi Mingwan's younger sister. The little baby girl from back then was already 13 years old and was in junior high school. The little girl had been close to this sister since she was young. She wanted to be with her sister the moment she returned home. I think I'll go back when I'm free. You should come back when you're free. Your grandmother hasn't been in good health recently. She's been missing you. Grandmother would miss her? Didn't she always think of herself as a money-losing commodity? Even though she had earned money outside and even bought a house. In her grandmother's eyes, she was inferior to her uncle's cousin. Wasn't it a little ironic? She was already used to it. Her grandmother's preference for boys was engraved in her bones and couldn't be changed easily. Silence. Even if Shi Mingwan went back, she wouldn't go to see her grandmother. So there was no need to say anything else. Shi Mingwan's voice sounded a little cautious. Is there anything else? Are you still blaming your grandmother? It's nothing. Shi Mingwan leaned against the wall behind her. The wall was a little cold, but she felt that this could keep her awake. Mom, don't think too much. I'm not coming back because I don't have time. If I have time, I'll naturally go back. 1-1. Shi Mingwan's voice had a hint of a sigh. After so many years, she had always felt that she had let this daughter down. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. I'm outside. Your dad misses you too. If you're free, come back and stay for a few more days. Got it? Shi Mingwan bit her lip. She thought for a moment and added, it's really not that I don't want to come back. It's the end of the year and there are a lot of things to do in the studio. Why don't I wait for the new year and come back to stay for a few more days? Shi Mingwan was just saying that. When the new year really came, she would have things to do again. Ever since she graduated and opened her own studio, she hadn't stayed at home for more than 7 days. But I'll cook your favorite dishes when the time comes. Shi Mingwan was very happy. She nagged for a long time before hanging up. Shi Mingwan listened patiently and didn't interrupt her. After hanging up the phone, she saw a black shadow on the ground in front of her. Shi Mingwan was shocked. She took a big step back. She looked up. Jean Hauze had arrived at some point in time. He stood there, and the light from behind shone on him. The angle of the backlight made his facial features a little unclear. He was tall and big. Perhaps it was because he was here to attend the banquet, but he was wearing a 3-piece suit. The dark patterned fabric stuck to his figure, making him look even taller and straighter. Shi Mingwan looked into his eyes and could clearly hear her own heartbeat. That was because she couldn't control the heartbeat of a woman toward a man. Half of it was because she knew that this man was her dear brother. His existence and his appearance could make her lose her peace of mind for the first time. She lowered her eyes and clenched her fists slightly. She actually had a lot to say and a lot to ask, but in the end, she gritted her teeth and walked past Jean Hauze, intending to leave. When she passed by Jean Hauze, her arm was tightly wrapped around by Jean Hauze. Her body froze there. She looked at him with a slightly cold gaze and suppressed emotions. He was also looking at her. His gaze was deep and unreadable. Shi Mingwan was wearing a long black goddess dress today. The V-neck design exposed the snow-white skin on her chest to the air. Behind it was a thin black gauze fabric. From this angle, he could even see her waistline. Shi Mingwan felt that Jean Hauze was holding her arm a little tightly. She looked at that hand and then at Jean Hauze. Mr. Jean, what's the matter? Mr. Jean? Jean Hauze narrowed his eyes and suddenly pulled her body in his direction. Then he hugged her and pushed her towards the stairwell. In a corner that couldn't be seen by the surveillance cameras, Jean Hauze pressed Shi Mingwan against the wall. Jean. Their lips met and all words were sealed in the kiss. Shi Mingwan was stunned for a moment. She looked at Jean Hauze and actually forgot to resist for a moment. His face was magnified in front of her eyes. The man in front of her was undoubtedly good-looking. Not only was he good-looking, but he also had a temperament that enchanted women. Cold, arrogant, and deep. With a hint of arrogance and untamed. Such a man was dangerous to women. He was like poppy soya. His lips were slightly cold. In this season, it was undoubtedly a little cold outside. Shi Mengwan had been outside for so long, and her limbs were already cold. Compared to his lips, his chest was much warmer. She was hugged by him and stimulated by his kiss. Her limbs were warm, but at the same time, she regained her rationality and thought. What was he doing? He was kissing her. At the same time that he brought his fiancée to this banquet hall, he was actually kissing her here? What kind of person did he think she was? Shi Mengwan was furious. She tried to push him, but she couldn't push him away. She raised her foot to kick him, but he clamped her foot. Shi Mengwan tried to struggle, but she couldn't break free no matter how hard she tried. She was furious. She couldn't push John Hauser away, so she opened her mouth and bit his lips hard. However, she didn't expect John Hauser, who was already prepared, to let go of her at this moment. Shi Mengwan didn't notice and bit her lips. The pain made Shi Mengwan let out a low cry. She had bitten very hard just now, and the skin on her lips was even slightly broken. The pain made her even angrier. She looked at John Hauser. He was still trapping her between the wall and him. She raised her eyes and looked at him. Her gaze was filled with coldness. Let go of me. The location wasn't right, so she couldn't shout. She deliberately lowered her voice and couldn't suppress her anger. John Hauser, what do you mean? Your fiancé is still inside. John Hauser, let go of me. John Hauser didn't answer her question. He looked at the anger on Shi Mengwan's face and narrowed his eyes slightly. She's not my fiancé. This could be considered an explanation. After all, he had never had any romantic feelings for Chen Feifei. Who would believe it? Thinking about the only 2 times she met John Hauser and his performance with Chen Feifei was just short of hanging on him. Even if she wasn't his fiancée, she was still his girlfriend. Shi Mengwan was silent. Her body was tightly pressed against the wall. Her gaze wasn't focused on John Hauser, but on an unknown point behind him. I understand. Mr. Jean, can you let go of me now? Her reaction was beyond his expectations. Jean Hauser stared at her face and pursed his lips slightly. He looked at Shi Mengwan and had no intention of retreating. Mr. Jean? If he didn't move aside, she couldn't go back to the banquet hall. Although Su Qingsang wasn't the main character today, she was no different from the main character. She might not have the time to look for her, but she didn't want Su Qingsang to suspect her. Did you take your medicine that day? This extremely abrupt question made Shi Mengwan's expression change slightly. She seemed to suddenly understand why Jean Hauser was blocking her way. Mr. Jean, what's wrong? Are you afraid that I'll use the child to threaten you or achieve some other goal? Shi Mengwan sneered. Now, she felt that even if the other party was the dear brother that she missed dearly, she wouldn't be able to suppress the anger in her heart. Don't worry, I've taken my medicine, and my period has already come. I'm not pregnant, and I won't use the child to do anything to you. After saying this extremely coldly, Shi Mengwan pushed Jean Hauser's body and quickly headed in the direction of the banquet hall. The moment her body left him, Jean Hauser raised his hand and almost grabbed her hand, but in the end he lowered it again. He stared at Shi Mengwan's back. No one knew what he was thinking, but his gaze was deep. Shi Mengwan returned to the banquet hall and wasn't in the mood to stay any longer. Her lips were still hurting, and she had bitten them herself. She went to the bathroom to freshen up her makeup and covered up the color with lipstick. It looked normal, but it couldn't suppress her anger. She was a little angry, but because of the current occasion, she couldn't even flare up. In the banquet hall, there were also people who knew her who came to greet her. Shi Mengwan's studio was now a little famous. There were also some socialites who liked to order dresses from her. Shi Mengwan couldn't leave even if she wanted to. After patiently exchanging pleasantries with those people, Shi Mengwan finally found a chance to tell Su Qingsang that she could leave first. Su Qingsang knew that, like herself, she didn't like such occasions very much. She asked her to come to her house for dinner in a few days, then waved her hand and let her go. Coming out of the banquet hall, Shi Mengwan shrunk her neck when the cold wind blew. The weather was very good today, and the sun was shining brightly. When she came, she only wore a trench coat. Now that it was late at night, even though she was wearing a coat, she still felt cold. She got into the car. Before going home, she thought that the refrigerator at home was almost empty, so she directly ordered some fruits and fresh food online. It was already very late when she got home. Shi Mengwan entered the house and had just put down her bag and changed into her home clothes when someone knocked on the door. She thought that the fresh food she ordered had arrived, so she got up to open the door. Unexpectedly, it was Zhang Haoze standing outside. Shi Mengwan blocked the door with her body and glanced at Zhang Haoze. He was still wearing the three-piece suit from the previous cocktail party. The light in the corridor shone on his face. He was still expressionless, but his eyes were now staring at her with a burning gaze. She felt her heart skip a beat again, and her hand behind the door couldn't help but tighten. "What's the matter?" Zhang Haoze didn't say anything. His gaze swept across her body. He tore off the pajamas she wore last time. The weather was a little cooler. She was wearing a pullover-style home dress. The pink bear on the front of the cotton dress looked especially cute. It didn't match her appearance at all, but it was surprisingly harmonious. Zhang Haoze didn't say anything. He took a step forward and was so close that Shi Mengwan could smell the faint scent of mint on his body. She took a deep breath and tried her best to make her voice sound normal and calm. "Mr. Zhang, what's the matter?" She deliberately kept the distance between the two of them so that Zhang Haoze wouldn't discover the fluctuations in her heart. She also didn't let him know that her heartbeat was out of order because of him, and that her emotions were affected because of him. Her unapproachable appearance made Zhang Haoze's brows furrow imperceptibly. "But you're not calling me dear brother anymore?" Shi Mengwan's hands behind the door tightened. She looked up at Zhang Haoze and met his eyes. "Didn't you tell me not to call you that? Mr. Zhang, since you don't admit that you're my dear brother, then just take it that I've recognized the wrong person. It's getting late. Please go ahead." Shi Mengwan's palm exerted force and directly slammed the door shut. Zhang Haoze, who didn't expect her to do this to him, was stunned and shut outside the door by her. Shi Mengwan didn't realize what she had done until she closed the door. She leaned against the door with a very ugly expression. He clearly said that he wasn't her dear brother, and he clearly didn't admit it. Why did he have to tease her heartstrings again and again? There was another knock on the door behind her. Shi Mengwan felt angry and didn't want to pay attention to it at all. The knocking on the door stopped. In less than 2 minutes, it sounded again. Shi Mengwan still ignored it and let him stay. Who cared what he wanted to do? Since he wasn't her dear brother, she had nothing to say to him. Shi Mengwan wanted to go back to her room to take a shower, but when she heard the knock on the door again, she couldn't restrain herself. She angrily ran to open the door and said without thinking, "Zhang Haoze, what do you want?" "You clearly." When she saw the deliveryman standing outside with a confused face, Shi Mengwan's expression suddenly became very embarrassed. "Sorry. You, Miss Shi Mengwan, right? We're from T-Cat Direct. These are the goods you ordered from T-Cat? Thank you." Shi Mengwan awkwardly took the delivery box from the other party's hand. After signing, she was still a little embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I wasn't angry at you just now." "I know. You were angry at this gentleman, right?" The courier stood a little to the side, and Shi Mengwan realized that Zhang Haoze hadn't left yet. The courier misunderstood and thought that the two of them were lovers quarreling. "Miss, even if you quarreled with your boyfriend, don't lock him outside the door. When I stepped out of the elevator just now, I was almost shocked when I saw someone." "You misunderstood, we're not. Thank you for your patronage. If you're satisfied, remember to give me a 5-star rating." The courier ignored Shi Mengwan's explanation. This matter had nothing to do with him. The other party took the list and walked towards the elevator. When he passed by Zhang Haoze, he didn't forget to blink at him. "Sir, if your girlfriend is angry, you have to coax her. You have to coax her. Our T-Cat Direct can also order flowers online. If you need them, you can order them online at any time." This unexpected advertisement made Shi Mengwan didn't know what to say. She hugged the big box and was about to close the door, but this time, she failed. Zhang Haoze wasn't prepared just now, but this time, he was prepared. She was still holding a box in her hand. Before she could close the door, He had already come in. You. Sure, Mengwan wanted to chase him out, but John Hauser directly closed the door. John Hauser. Sure, Mengwan stared at him for a long time. The box in her hand was really not light. She turned around and went to the kitchen, planning to chase him away later. After entering the kitchen, Sure Mengwan had always had the habit of tidying up things properly. She took out the fruits and vegetables inside and sorted them out. She hadn't eaten anything just now and planned to make herself a bowl of noodles. Knowing that John Hauser wouldn't be able to chase him away for a while, Sure Mengwan decided to solve her own needs first. She would talk about it after she was full. She took out tomatoes and eggs and planned to cook tomato and egg noodles. The cabbage that was delivered today was also not bad. She washed it together. Sure Mengwan didn't like to eat whole leaves of vegetables when she cooked noodles. When she ate vegetables, she had to cut them into pieces. This was a very strange habit. Sure Mengwan cut the vegetables and processed the ingredients. Her culinary skills weren't bad. As the eldest daughter of the family, she had been studying and working outside for so many years. Her culinary skills were quite good. In less than 20 minutes, she had already taken the noodles out of the pot and scooped them up. The eggs on top were fried golden, and the tomatoes and vegetables matched well. They looked very appetizing. Sure Mengwan had forgotten that John Hauser was still outside. Just as she was about to take the noodles to the dining table outside, she turned around and found John Hauser standing at the kitchen door. He had been staring at her for an unknown period of time. She didn't know how long he had been there. Sure Mengwan's expression turned ugly again. She didn't want to pay attention to John Hauser. In fact, seeing him in front of her always made her uncontrollably think of what happened back then. She thought of the year when she and her dear brother depended on each other. She picked up the noodles and passed John Hauser to place them on the dining table. Sure Mengwan was about to sit down and eat the noodles. However, she realized that John Hauser had also followed her out and sat at the dining table. Sure Mengwan, who was about to eat the noodles, stopped for a moment. She looked at John Hauser and didn't know what was wrong with her. President John, you haven't left. Do you want to eat noodles? John Hauser glanced at her. Before she could react, he brought the bowl of noodles over and placed it in front of him, including the chopsticks in her hand. She was stunned for a moment and saw that John Hauser was like a robber. He actually started to eat the noodles that she cooked just like that. You. Sure Mengwan wanted to say that she was just being polite. She didn't want to treat him to noodles at all, okay? Didn't he know that this was just China-style politeness? Also, who gave him the right to come uninvited and sit in the living room of her house, eating the supper that she had prepared for herself? John Hauser. Chapter 658. There was a faint aroma of food in the air. Sure Mengwan was wearing the clothes that Xiao Zhe had bought. She scooped up the food in the kitchen and carried it out. Xiao Zhe sat on the small table like a master. It was unknown where Xiao Zhe found this table. Previously, Sure Mengwan and Xiao Zhe were eating at the coffee table. This morning, she cooked porridge. When she brought it to the coffee table, she felt that it was very inconvenient to eat on the sofa. She had to bend over. We should get a table, she said. Wouldn't it be more comfortable to sit down and eat? When she said that, Xiao Zhe moved the table over at noon. It was a square table that was commonly seen in the countryside. There were also 2 chairs that were brought along with him. Sure Mengwan didn't even know how Xiao Zhe appeared. She watched as Xiao Zhe picked up the bowl and ate in big mouthfuls. The youth was still growing, so his appetite was astonishing. She basically cooked according to the amount of food she used to eat with her parents when they were at home. But other than her share, the rest went into the youth's stomach. The young man ate so much, but he didn't seem fat at all. He has lost a lot of weight. He sure had a lot of energy. Just now, when the table had been moved in, he had moved it in alone. She had asked for help, but he had refused. After resting for 2 days, the wounds on his face had healed a lot. There was only a bruise at the corner of his mouth. He could already see the youth's true appearance. He had an extremely good-looking face with long and narrow eyes. Sure Mengwan's previous school, the town she lived in, and the people she met after coming to Lin City, None of them were as good-looking as Jean Hauser. He didn't lose to those celebrities on TV at all. It was just that this image was a little bad. His hand was injured, so he didn't hold the bowl. He just held it weakly. They ate like this. His posture was inevitably a little ugly. If this happened at home and her grandmother saw this, she would definitely scold her. He said that they had no manners and did not even hold their bowls properly. The youth noticed that Shi Mengwan was staring at him. He stopped eating and stared at Shi Mengwan. "What are you looking at?" As soon as the young man opened his mouth, his pretty face was ruined. Her voice during the puberty period was really not pleasant to hear. Shi Mengwan was caught peeping at the youth, so she looked a little uncomfortable. No matter what, she was only 12 years old this year. Staring at a boy like this was really too unrestrained. "I just want to ask, where did you get that table?" The youth didn't say anything. He finished the rice in his bowl in a few bites. When he went to scoop the next bowl of rice, he glanced at Shi Mengwan. "What? Afraid my desk was stolen? What if they come looking for you?" She didn't. Without waiting for Shi Mengwan to explain, the youth snorted. "Don't worry. I didn't steal it. No one will come to catch you. Big brother." Shi Mengwan bit her lip. She was a little hurt by the youth's hostile and impatient attitude. "I was just curious. I picked it up," the young man answered casually. "If I were going to steal, I wouldn't steal such a crappy table. Indeed, it was a little rotten. Look at the corner of the table, the paint had peeled off." Shi Mengwan didn't ask any more and ate quietly. However, when she saw the youth put down the bowl, she had a new question. "Where did you get the money to buy groceries?" The ones she bought yesterday and the ones she bought today. If she only gave the youth a few dozen yuan, it would not be enough. One had to know that the young man had actually bought ribs and meat today. Not only that, the young man also gave some rice and flour to the family. She was really curious. The young man relaxed his body on the chair. After eating and drinking his fill, the unruly and sinister aura on his body faded a little. "Don't worry. I didn't steal or rob. I came above board." Shi Mengwan looked at him with a hint of confusion in her eyes. "I can't ask?" "No." The young man was very arrogant. Shi Mengwan didn't ask any more. She lowered her head and continued to eat, but she muttered softly. The young man heard that sentence. The young man knocked on the table. "What do you mean? Speak clearly." Shi Mengwan stopped talking, but the young man suddenly moved his face closer. The table was old and not big. The young man suddenly moved so close that Shi Mengwan almost let go of the bowl she was holding. "Let me tell you, I'll worry about the money. It's not your turn." After saying that, as if he was afraid that Shi Mengwan wouldn't listen to him, he pointed his index finger at her face. "Remember. Got it? If you dare to pick up trash, I'll cripple you first." Shi Mengwan didn't say anything. She looked at the young man and asked her question for the first time. "Dear brother, where are your parents? Why are you living here alone?" Moreover, other than the simplest furniture, there wasn't a single photo in the house. There wasn't even a trace of adult life. "My parents are dead." The young man glanced at her and sneered. "What about you? Where are your parents? Why did you come here alone? I heard you speak, and you sound a little different from the locals of Lin City. You're not from this city, are you? What about your parents? Why don't they care about you?" Shi Mengwan bit her lip and thought of her grandmother, who valued boys over girls, and her mother, who had just given birth to a little sister but was despised by her grandmother. "It's not that they don't care about me, it's that I ran away from home." "You're quite bold." The young man stared at Shi Mengwan and clicked his tongue. "With your looks, you dare to run away from home?" Nothing happened to her. She was really lucky. She asked for it when she met the two hooligans that day. "What's wrong with my looks?" Shi Mengwan's mother was a beauty. Shi Mengwan really didn't think she was good-looking. The young man suddenly moved his face closer and stared straight at her. Shi Mengwan felt uncomfortable being stared at by him. "What are you doing? Do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know?" The young man moved so close that she could clearly see the fine hairs on his skin. After all, she was a little girl, so she felt embarrassed. Shi Mengwan stepped back a little. Forget it, I won't tease you anymore. She wasn't like herself, who grew up in the streets. She was very clear about these things. She was just a child. The young man felt bored, so he stood up and walked out. Where are you going? Let's go. Perhaps he felt that his tone was a little bad. The young man added in his duck-like voice, I'm going to earn money. Aren't you always worried that I don't have money? I'm going to earn it now. Who was worried that he didn't have money? Shi Mengwan wasn't worried at all. Your hand is still injured. What do you want to do? Shi Mengwan thought of the table he had moved back earlier. The doctor told you not to carry heavy things. Have you forgotten? Don't worry. This injury won't kill me. The young man said this and left. The young man left, but he didn't come back for a long time. When night fell, Shi Mengwan wasn't waiting for him anymore. It was just that she didn't feel safe at home alone. There was only one door in this bungalow. There wasn't even an extra security door outside. It wasn't like when she was in town, where her neighbors were all close to her. It didn't matter. She hadn't seen anyone living next door in the past few days. What she didn't know was that this place was very close to a development zone in Lin City. This was an old city area. Most of the locals weren't willing to live here anymore. They were all rented to foreign workers. The people who lived here all went to work during the day, and the workers all had their own things to do. After returning home, they would be tired for a day. Who would be happy to meddle in other people's business? This was also the reason why no one came to help Shi Mengwan when she was chased by two people last time. Shi Mengwan curled up on the small sofa and stared at the door. She didn't dare to sleep. She didn't know where Qiao Zhe had gone and why he wasn't back yet. She got up and looked at the time again. The old alarm clock was already pointing at 11:30. The weather didn't seem to be good today. She heard the sound of rain hitting the window. The voice came again and again, making her more and more anxious. After all, she was only 12 years old. She ran away from home alone to Lin City. That young man, even though she clearly wasn't familiar with him, even though the young man looked vicious. But he was here, at least it wouldn't be so empty. She turned around again, but she still couldn't sleep. The rain outside seemed to be getting heavier and heavier. She couldn't sleep anymore, so she simply got up and wrapped herself in a blanket. She curled up and sat on the sofa. It was at this moment that the door opened. She was startled by the sound of the door opening and almost jumped up. It was at this moment that the young man pushed the door open and entered. The young man's clothes were wet, and his hair was also wet. The soles of his shoes were stained with mud, and he looked a little disheveled. Seeing that Shi Mengwan was still awake, the young man was stunned. You're not asleep yet? Shi Mengwan was too embarrassed to say that she was timid. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to sleep. Where did you go? Why are you back so late? You're long-winded. The young man shook the water off his hair and went to his room. Shi Mengwan got up and followed behind him. Why are you all wet? The young man replied casually. He was about to take off the wet clothes on his body. Suddenly, he turned around and looked at Shi Mengwan. There should still be ingredients in the kitchen, right? Yes. Are you hungry? Cook a bowl of noodles for me. The young man looked at Shi Mengwan. Cook more. I'm going to take a shower. His tone of command didn't arouse the slightest dissatisfaction or resistance from Shi Mengwan. He was back. There was one more person here, so she didn't have to be so afraid anymore. She turned around and went to the kitchen. Cooking couldn't be any easier for her. The moment she took out the noodles, she thought of the young man's overly thin body. After thinking for a moment, she took out an egg and the remaining tomatoes that the young man had bought earlier. She took 20 minutes to cook the tomato and egg noodles. She took it out and placed it on the small table outside. The young man had just taken a shower. As soon as he came out, he smelled the fragrance of the noodles. He glanced at Shi Mengwan. Without saying anything, he sat down and picked up the noodles to eat. When he picked up the chopsticks, he realized something and glanced at Shi Mengwan. You're not eating? No need. Go ahead and eat. Shi Mengwan shook his head. She had already brushed her teeth. She was a bit of a neat freak. After brushing her teeth, she refused to eat again. When the youth heard this, he didn't care about her anymore. Shi Mengwan could go to sleep now. I'm going to sleep. When you're done eating, put the bowl in the sink. I'll wash it tomorrow. Long-winded, the youngster replied without raising his head while eating the noodles. Shi Mingwan's expression didn't look good. How was she long-winded? She ignored the young man and went straight to the sofa to sleep. The moment she closed her eyes, she thought, I don't seem to be that good at cooking, right? Why did the youth eat so happily every time? He wondered what kind of life he had led in the past. She was curious about the young man. But at this time, she knew that she couldn't get anything out of him. The sound of the bowl being placed on the table brought Shi Mingwan back to her senses. Only then did she realize that Jean Hauze had already finished eating the noodles and was staring at her. She retracted her gaze and returned to the kitchen without another word. The materials were all ready-made, and her movements were fast, so it was not complicated to make. He cooked another bowl of noodles for himself. However, he realized that he didn't have much appetite. In that year, how many times had she cooked for her dear brother? How many times had she cooked noodles? However, she realized that her dear brother's favorite was still tomato and egg noodles. Even though her cooking methods didn't seem like those of a chef, and were even a little weird, Xiaozhe still liked them very much. For example, no one would cut up the vegetables and put them into the noodles when cooking noodles. Another example, she always liked to cut the tomatoes into small pieces. It wasn't like the ones in restaurants outside where the tomatoes were sliced. In the past, Su Qingsang had laughed at her and said that no one cooked tomato and egg noodles like her. She retaliated and said that this was her own creation. Was that okay? Fortunately, Su Qingsang wasn't good at cooking, but she wasn't picky. Whenever the two sisters had a gathering, she would eat whatever he cooked. Just like her dear brother, no matter what she cooked or how she cooked, he would eat the same. And when she looked at Jean Hauze just now, she thought of her dear brother. Although one of them looked a little rough when he wolfed down the food, and the other looked slow and elegant. However, she really saw the similarities between the two of them. For example, whether it was her dear brother or Jean Hauze, they both liked to pick up the noodles first. After picking up the noodles with his chopsticks, they didn't eat it. Instead, they drank a mouthful of the soup in the noodles. Also, Jean Hauze's way of holding the chopsticks was the same as her dear brother's. A normal person would hold the chopsticks horizontally. However, Jean Hauze's fingers were especially long. When he held the chopsticks, the angle was a little lower than the average person's. It looked like he was holding it crooked. After confirming once again that Jean Hauze was her dear brother and finding the similarities between the two of them, Shi Mingwan wasn't happy at all. Her dear brother had long forgotten about her. She looked at the bowl of noodles and had no appetite, but she forced herself to carry it out. She was stunned when she didn't see Jean Hauze. She was so distracted that she didn't hear the sound of the door closing. She thought that Jean Hauze had already left. She couldn't tell if she was disappointed or something else. She only felt that her entire heart was empty. That feeling returned to when she was 13 years old, when she lost her dear brother. After casually eating a few mouthfuls of noodles, Shi Mingwan wasn't in the mood to continue. She put away the bowls and tidied up the kitchen again. She was obviously extremely tired, but she didn't want to sleep at all. She simply mopped the kitchen and living room floors. After she was done being tired and busy, Shi Mingwan returned to her room. The moment she entered the door, she was shocked. The person she thought had left was actually sitting on the bed in her room. Shi Mingwan stood at the door, looked at Jean Hauze, and then looked in the direction of the door. You didn't leave? She looked at Jean Hauze. He had already taken off his suit jacket and vest. He was only wearing a shirt inside. At this moment, two of the buttons on his shirt were undone, and his sleeves were casually rolled up to his elbows. The stray hair on his forehead hung down, and his leopard-like eyes were still sharp. Especially when he was still sitting on the bed, his slender legs casually folded together. Besides being handsome, he also looked a little lazy. The words she wanted to chase him away were stuck in her throat, and she couldn't say a word. She didn't know before, but now she realized that it wasn't just women who misled people. It was the same for men. It took her a few seconds to find her voice, and Shi Mingwan took a step back. Looking at the enlarged face in front of her, she couldn't find her voice for a long time. She pinched her fingernails into her palms and reminded herself that the person in front of her wasn't her dear brother. She couldn't be entangled with him anymore. "Mr. Jean, it's getting late. Please leave." Her order to leave made Jean Hauser stand up. The room was only that big, so he easily walked in front of her. Sher Mengwan thought that he was going to leave, so she took another step back twice. She signaled that he could leave. However, Jean Hauser suddenly placed a hand on the wall behind her. Sher Mengwan's back was pressed tightly against the wall, and she didn't dare to move. "What did you call me?" Jean Hauser slowly moved his face closer. His breath pointed at her face. Sher Mengwan felt uncomfortable. She didn't know what kind of madness he was going through. Since he didn't admit that he was her dear brother and had a fiancée, then she should keep a distance from him. "Mr. Jean. It's getting late. Please, woo." Her lips were kissed by someone, and the man's minty scent assaulted her face. Behind her was the cold wall, and in front of her was his hot chest. In one day, she had experienced the same scene twice. She didn't understand what Jean Hauser was thinking. All of her consciousness was confused by this domineering kiss. She thought of the way Jean Hauser ate noodles, and the way her dear brother ate noodles. She thought of the way Jean Hauser sat on her bed with his legs folded, and then she thought of the way her dear brother sat on the sofa in the small bungalow. The two faces of youth and maturity overlapped in front of her. She couldn't escape from Jean Hauser's kiss. She even forgot how she resisted Jean Hauser in the hotel. Or perhaps at that time, she had to worry about someone passing by, but now she didn't have to worry. The kiss slowly changed, and Jean Hauser's hands began to move around her body. Perhaps it was because the temperature in the room wasn't low, but she actually felt that his hands were a little hot. Her consciousness became more and more blurry. The only remaining string of reason told her that this was wrong. She couldn't do this. However, when Jean Hauser's hand reached into her clothes, that kind of reason completely collapsed. She was utterly defeated in front of him and retreated step by step. She didn't know when her body arrived on the bed. She didn't know when her clothes fell to the ground. She only remembered feeling Jean Hauser's kiss, Jean Hauser's touch, and the feeling Jean Hauser gave her. Although it wasn't rough, it wasn't as urgent as last time. However, it couldn't be said to be very gentle. Although she tried her best to restrain herself, it still carried a barbaric, almost plundering attack. When she merged with him, her mind went blank, and the only thought left was dear brother. "Dear brother," she whispered those 3 words softly, but it made Jean Hauser's eyes become deeper and gloomier. He kissed her lips, but felt that it wasn't enough. He increased his strength and smashed her into pieces. Naturally, that voice couldn't come out anymore. Everything would come to an end. When everything returned to calm, Sher Mengwan's remaining rationality finally began to return. She suddenly realized what she had done. What did Jean Hauser do? She turned to look at him. The person was lying on the bed, looking at the ceiling above his head. His breathing was a little heavy. There was only the sound of the two of them breathing in the room. Sher Mengwan turned her face away. Her body was tired, but her heart was even more tired. What were they doing? What did he take her for? She turned over and slowly curled up. She was very tired. She needed to sleep now. Her body was carried into someone's arms. She tried to struggle, but she didn't have the strength. Moreover, struggling at this time was actually very laughable. They had just done everything they could and couldn't do. Wasn't it too late to struggle now? Sher Mengwan felt that she was being unreasonable, but now she was really being unreasonable. "Don't touch me. Don't come again." She had no strength left. Didn't he know his limits just now? Jean Hauser didn't do anything to her. He just hugged her into his arms, and his arms were a little tight. "Jean Hauser, let go of me." Sher Mengwan's back was tightly pressed against his chest. The two of them were in an extremely intimate position at this moment. She didn't like such intimacy, or perhaps she wasn't used to it. "I'm going to take a shower." Seeing that he had no intention of letting go of her, she had no choice but to pull his arm. "I said let go of me. I'm going to take a shower." Jean Hauser didn't let go of her. Instead, he turned her body around. The resistance on her face was too obvious. It was so obvious that Jean Hauser didn't understand what she was resisting. He kissed her lips again. Shi Mengwan really felt tired. She didn't understand how he did it, but she couldn't ask. Because Jean Hauser started again. Just when she wanted to regain her senses and draw a clear line between them, he started a new round of plundering. This time, she didn't even have a place to escape. Shi Mengwan couldn't sleep. She couldn't sleep. After 3 rounds of sex and entanglement with Jean Hauser, she was the same as last time. She should have been extremely tired, but now she was full of energy. She looked at the ceiling above her head and didn't quite understand how things had turned out like this. Her gaze fell on Jean Hauser's face. What was he thinking? Why could he have sex with her while being affectionate with his girlfriend? She had never seen them get along, but she felt that she didn't need to see it. Just based on the fact that Chen Feifei had been holding Jean Hauser's hand just now. She knew. In places that she didn't see, the two of them were definitely intimate. But why? Chapter 659. Shi Mengwan never knew that one day, she would fall into such a situation. She had once fantasized that if one day she met her dear brother and she found him, what would happen to her? Ever since she separated from her dear brother at the age of 13, she had often thought about it. Sometimes, his heart ached just thinking about it. When she couldn't find Big Brother, she felt lost and lost. But now that he had found the person, he felt even worse. She was upset that her dear brother had forgotten about her and that he was treating her with such an attitude now. However, she hated herself even more. For the sake of that little bit of hope from before. He had put himself in such an awkward situation. Her gaze fell on Jean Hauser's face, only to find that he had opened his eyes. Seeing that she was staring at him, he reached out and pulled her waist into his arms. Their bodies were pressed together again. Shi Mengwan wasn't used to this kind of intimacy. Don't move. Jean Hauser put his hand on her waist to prevent her from making a sound. It seems that you don't want to sleep? If that's the case. His hand slowly moved down from the back of her waist. Shi Mengwan was shocked and quickly grabbed his hand. Don't do anything rash. Even she herself felt that her words were not imposing at all. If he wanted to mess around, he would have done it long ago. Why would he care about this? She lowered her head and saw Jean Hauser's chest. She turned her face away uncomfortably. I'm sleepy. I want to sleep. She tried to turn her back on him, but he wouldn't give her the chance. He pulled her body into his arms again. He lowered his head and looked at the flash of resistance in her eyes. Let's sleep like this. Shi Mengwan became more and more uncomfortable. How could she fall asleep like this? If you don't sleep, I'll continue. His hand rested on her waist again. Jean Hauser threatened again. Shi Mengwan seemed to be frightened and quickly closed her eyes. Her eyes were closed tightly, and her long and thick eyelashes were trembling slightly. Jean Hauser's eyes darkened. The hand that wasn't on Shi Mengwan's waist trembled slightly. He raised it as if he was about to touch her face, but then he put it down again. He closed his eyes and did not look at her again. Shi Mengwan couldn't fall asleep. Her mind was in a mess. She was rarely at a loss like this. Jean Hauser's chest was burning, and his hands on his waist were firm and strong. She couldn't break free, but she was afraid that he would really do it again. She closed her eyes and forced herself not to look at him. She thought that she wouldn't be able to fall asleep, but she fell asleep again in a daze. The dream came without warning, and Shi Mengwan saw her 12-year-old self again. She had been with Qiao Zhe for more than a month. After more than a month, she had more or less familiarized herself with her surroundings. Sometimes she would go out during the day to look around, but she would not go too far and would come back again. She found a very old bookstore at the end of the alley. Then she had something to do. Qiao Zhe's residence didn't have a TV or other electronic products. At that time, there were already cell phones. However, it was impossible for people like Qiao Zhe and her to afford cell phones and communication products. Shi Mengwan had nothing to do, so she went to the bookstore to borrow books every day. There weren't many books in the bookstore, but she liked to go there. At least she could pass the time. However, Qiao Zhe went out every day. He seemed to be very busy. Especially after the injury on his hand healed, he went out early and returned late every day. Sometimes he would come back for dinner, but after dinner, he would run out again. She asked him what he was doing, but he told her not to worry about it. After a long time, she didn't ask anymore. Like Xiao Zhe's sister, she cleaned up the house, cooked, and washed clothes for him every day. However, after she stayed at Xiao Zhe's place for more than a month, the weather in Lin City entered late autumn. Lin City was located in the south, and the weather was extreme. In such a season, the temperature difference was huge. It was fine during the day. She only wore long sleeves, so she didn't feel cold. But at night, a blanket really couldn't warm her up. She felt cold. When it turned cold on the first day, she could still endure it. The next day, there was an autumn rain. She was extremely cold. She curled up on the sofa and looked at Xiao Zhe's room with a conflicted expression. She had stayed at Xiao Zhe's place for more than a month, so she naturally knew that the young man's house only had a blanket and nothing else. She didn't know where the young man got the money from during this period of time, but he had enough to eat and buy clothes for her. But she wasn't sure if her dear brother would agree to buy a blanket. She was so cold that she felt uncomfortable. She tossed and turned on the sofa for a long time, but she couldn't fall asleep. "What are you doing?" Her movements were so loud that even Xiao Zhe, who was inside, was disturbed by her. He got up and looked at Shi Mengwan, who was sleeping on the sofa. His face was full of unhappiness. Shi Mengwan got up and wrapped herself tightly with the blanket. She looked at the young man timidly. "I'm cold." She was too embarrassed to continue. She originally wanted to take care of Xiao Zhe until his hand recovered and then go home. She thought about how she quarreled with her grandmother and how her family was like that. If she went back and her parents didn't change their mind and still wanted to send her sister away, she would rather not go back. But after staying for more than a month, although Xiao Zhe sometimes looked fierce, he treated her well. Xiao Zhe treated her well, but she was a little embarrassed. He saved her from being bullied. She stayed to repay him for saving her life. But now, she wanted him to raise her. Now, she even wanted him to buy her a blanket. A 12-year-old girl was very thin-skinned. If it wasn't for the fact that it was really cold, she would be too embarrassed to say anything. Xiao Zhe glanced at her, then looked at the sofa. "Go sleep on the bed." "What about you?" Shi Mengwan bit her lip and looked at the sofa. He was much taller than her. How could he sleep on such a sofa? Xiao Zhe didn't say anything and gestured for her to get up. He pulled the blanket over and lay down on the sofa. When he really fell asleep, Shi Mengwan realized that Xiao Zhe really couldn't sleep. He was already 1.7 meters tall. He couldn't even put his feet down when he slept on the sofa. Not to mention that the small blanket couldn't cover him. "Dear brother, go to sleep." Xiao Zhe closed his eyes as if he was going to sleep just like that. Shi Mengwan bit her lip. She didn't enter the room. She looked at Xiao Zhe and then at the bed. In the end, her hands clenched tightly into fists. "Dear brother, why don't you sleep on the bed too?" The weather was getting colder and colder. She couldn't let Xiao Zhe sleep on the sofa outside. If this continued, he would definitely catch a cold. When Xiao Zhe heard this, he opened his eyes and looked at her. "You want to sleep with me?" Shi Mengwan was a little embarrassed. In the end, she nodded. "Dear brother, I believe in you." Xiao Zhe stared at her face and finally sat up. Shi Mengwan entered the room, and Xiao Zhe followed her in. He lay down on the bed. Shi Mengwan stood there, feeling a little awkward. After Xiao Zhe fell asleep, he pulled the blanket over himself and closed his eyes to sleep. After waiting for a while, he didn't see Shi Mengwan come up to sleep, so he opened his eyes again. He looked at Shi Mengwan and found that she was standing there motionlessly, a little at a loss for what to do. "Aren't you sleepy?" Sleepy? How could she not be sleepy? But no matter how sleepy she was still a girl. Just now, she was just impulsive. She was afraid that dear brother wouldn't sleep well and would catch a cold, so she asked him to sleep on the bed too. Now that she had calmed down, Shi Mengwan felt awkward. "Then go to sleep." Xiao Zhe ran outside every day during the day, so he exercised a lot every day. Now, he was sleepy and wanted to sleep. Before he closed his eyes, he glanced at Shi Mengwan again. Don't worry, I'm not interested in your shriveled body. Shi Mengwan was still a little girl. When had she ever heard such words? Her face was burning fiercely. She was blushing and embarrassed. But what Xiao Zhe said was the truth. She was only 12 years old this year and hadn't developed yet. She was just a little girl. She got on the bed and slept an arm's length away from Xiao Zhe. She covered her body with the blanket. Covering herself with a blanket was completely different from covering herself with a blanket. She finally felt that she wasn't cold anymore. Because she wasn't cold anymore, her complexion was much better. With someone sleeping beside her, she thought that she wouldn't be able to sleep. But she was really sleepy. Slowly, she actually fell asleep. When Shi Mengwan woke up in the morning, she realized that she was sleeping with Xiao Zhe. The young man's sleeping posture was quite casual. One of his feet was already outside the blanket, and the other was still under the blanket. His slender arm was placed on her shoulder just like that. Shi Mengwan looked at that hand and then at the young man's sleeping face. She confirmed that the young man didn't mean it. She uncomfortably stepped back, wanting to avoid the young man's hand. But the bed was only so big, so where could she avoid it? She could only take the young man's hand away, but the young man opened his eyes at this moment. Her hand was still holding his hand, and she suddenly met the young man's dark and deep gaze. Shi Mengwan was shocked and quickly let go of her hand. Xiao Zhe's hand dropped again and hit her shoulder. She felt the pain, and her face instantly changed color. "What are you doing?" The young man stood up. His duck-like voice sounded a little hoarse in the morning, and it was even more unpleasant to hear. "Nothing." Shi Mengwan quickly got up. I'm just asking you what you're eating for breakfast." "Anything." There was no need to ask about such things. Shi Mengwan had always made her own decisions. Shi Mengwan hadn't lived with her parents since she was young. Because her parents had given birth to a girl, she wasn't close to her cousins at home. This was the first time she had slept in the same bed with a boy, and it was a boy she had not known for long. The young man only felt that she was strange. How could he have thought of her young girl's thoughts? Shi Mengwan had lived with the young man for a few days before she realized that in the young man's heart, there was no difference between men and women. Every day, he slept as he should and did as he should. He still took good care of Shi Mengwan. However, she slowly came to her senses. Perhaps in the young man's heart at that time, he only treated her as a little brother or a little sister. He was very busy. She didn't even know why he was so busy. What she could be sure of was that the young man was definitely not studying. She knew that other people's children should be in school at the age of 15. They were either in their first or second year of high school. However, the young man wasn't in school. She had asked a few times, but Xiao Zhe said he wasn't. She didn't ask anymore. Her relationship with the young man had always been like this. She treated the young man as a big brother, and the young man treated her as a little sister. If the young man hadn't bought the wrong bowl of glutinous rice balls that day and bought them home as glutinous rice balls, their relationship might have always been that of a big brother and a little sister, right? Shi Mengwan woke up from her sleep and realized that she had slept until noon again. She blinked her eyes and seemed to have spent some effort to realize where she was and what had happened. She looked at the other side of the bed, but it was already empty. Zhan Haoze had already left. She sat up and the blanket slid down. The marks on her body were no longer covered. Shi Mengwan pursed her lips into a straight line. She bit her lip and thought of Zhan Haoze's frivolous behavior last night, and of her obedience without any resistance. She suddenly felt as if there was a thorn in her heart. She curled up her body and pulled up the blanket to cover herself. She looked at an unknown point, and her mood became gloomy bit by bit. Today was Su Qingsang's birthday. Su Qingsang's birthday was also very interesting. It was the day after Christmas. In the past, Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan would always be together. The two sisters would have a meal together on Su Qingsang's birthday. They would celebrate her birthday together. Su Qingsang was an illegitimate daughter. In the past, no one in the Su family would remember her birthday, and no one would specially celebrate her birthday. Every year, she would ask Su Qingsang to come to her apartment and cook a bowl of longevity noodles for her. This year was different. Su Qingsang was married. Shi Mengwan believed that Hu Jinyao would definitely be prepared. On Christmas Day, Shi Mengwan spent it with the employees of the studio. It was the end of the year. Although there were many things to do, she was not an unreasonable boss. She treated the employees to a meal and accompanied them to karaoke, which was very rare. After a night of fooling around, she remembered the next day that she had an appointment with 2 clients that day. Shi Mengwan had already ordered a cake, but the client was particularly difficult to deal with. After Shi Mengwan sent the client away, she went to take the cake and rushed to the place where Su Qingsang was celebrating her birthday. Only then did she realize that something was wrong. Su Qingsang had acknowledged her mother, and Xiang Kaiping was also there. But this time, not only Xiang Kaiping, but also Su Qinghui was there for her birthday. Shi Mengwan looked at Su Qingsang and then at Su Qinghui. The calmest person among them was Hu Jinyao, as if nothing had happened. Shi Mengwan looked at him for a few minutes and realized that Su Qinghui probably felt guilty towards Xiang Kaiping because Xiang Kaiping didn't like him. She looked at Su Qinghui and felt strange. She had to admit that a woman's intuition was quite accurate. In Shi Mengwan's heart, Su Qinghui was the representative of a scumbag. He had a wife, but also an old lover. Not only did he have an old lover, but he also had an illegitimate daughter? In the past, he had ignored this illegitimate daughter for so many years. When his old lover came back, he started to care about this illegitimate daughter again. No matter how she looked at it, it was strange. She felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't tell why. Seeing that Xiang Kaiping was unhappy, she used her usual talent and laughed in front of her. Finally, Xiang Kaiping had a smile on her face. After the party, Shi Mengwan was a little worried about Su Qingsang. However, when she saw the protective look on Hu Jinyao's face, she felt relieved again. A faint envy surged in her heart. No matter how difficult Su Qingsang had been in the past 20 years, at least she was happy now. After all, Hu Jinyao was really good to her. After saying goodbye to Su Qingsang, Shi Mengwan wasn't in a hurry to go home. It had been more than a week since the last time Zhang Haoze appeared and left. These days, she couldn't help but think of Zhang Haoze. Occasionally, she would ask herself in her heart, why couldn't she let him go? She kept convincing herself to forget Zhang Haoze, the man who came and went as he pleased, but she found that she couldn't do it. She stopped the car in front of the river embankment, got out, and walked along the river embankment. It was winter in Lin City, and the weather was very cold. There weren't many people on the river embankment. Shi Mengwan tightened her coat, walked to a bench, and sat down. Lin City had been developing well in the past few years. There were tall buildings on the other side of the river embankment, and the LED walls outside the buildings were playing all kinds of advertisements. The new year was coming, and the advertisements were very festive and red. However, Shi Mengwan didn't feel the atmosphere of the new year at all. She took out her phone and took a picture of the scenery on the other side of the river. She wanted to post it on WeChat, but in the end, she deleted it. This was the way of the world. Happy things could be shared, but loneliness couldn't be shared with anyone. She put away her phone and planned to go home, feeling a little cold from the cold wind. At that moment, another person sat down on the bench. Shi Mengwan was stunned for a moment. She turned her face, and the light from the river embankment shone on the person's face. She looked at Zhang Haoze and was stunned for a moment. She was looking at him and he was looking at her. She couldn't help but look behind her again. There was no one else. It was just him. She didn't know when he came and how long had he been here. Zhang. Before she could finish her sentence, Zhang Haoze reached out and hugged her tightly. Shi Mengwan's body froze there. She didn't know what to say. There seemed to be something wrong with Zhang Haoze today. His hands held her tightly in his arms. The night wind blew, and Shi Mengwan should feel cold. But now that she was hugged by him, she didn't feel cold. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. She didn't move, and he didn't move either, until she seemed to hear someone approaching and walking in this direction. She tried to retreat from Zhang Haoze's arms, but he hugged her very tightly. She was helpless. When someone approached, she buried her face in his chest. Inexplicably, she didn't want others to see her with Jean Hauser. The footsteps approached. The person might have just passed by here at night, but he quickly left. She could hear the footsteps approaching, and they seemed to have stopped for a moment. She didn't know that the people who passed by were two girls. When they saw Jean Hauser's appearance, even though they didn't see it clearly, they were still stunned by Jean Hauser. One of the two girls even wanted to secretly take out her phone to take a picture of Jean Hauser, but she was defeated by Jean Hauser's gloomy gaze. As his footsteps left, Jean Hauser's hand loosened a little. Shi Mengwan looked up from his arms and met his deep eyes. There were many emotions in those eyes. Shi Mengwan couldn't see them clearly for a moment. She wanted to see them clearly, but she found that Jean Hauser's gaze made her sink into it. Their eyes met, and her eyes were filled with his shadow. Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes slightly. He suddenly approached her, pressed a hand on the back of her head, and kissed her lips forcefully. His lips were cold and so was hers. In this weather, the temperature of their bodies wouldn't be too high. However, after their slightly cold lips met, she began to feel hot. She blinked her eyes. Jean Hauser's face in front of her made her a little intoxicated. She couldn't help but reach out her hand to hold his face, as if she wanted to see his face more clearly. There was a pair of hands on her eyes. Jean Hauser covered her eyes and deepened the kiss. His embrace slowly warmed her. Shi Mengwan, who had felt lonely before, decided not to think about anything for a moment. Just like that, she was hugged and kissed by him. She couldn't see his face, and the feeling in the darkness was especially clear. His kiss was so domineering, and all her feelings were focused on that one spot. She even unconsciously responded to him. And that kind of response made him deepen the kiss. Shi Mengwan was stunned for a moment. She realized what she had done and went back to pull Jean Hauser's hand. However, he let go of her at this moment and hugged her tightly instead. Her face was on his shoulder, so she couldn't see his expression. Her hands hung by her side. For a moment, she wanted to hug him back, but she forced herself to put them down. He suddenly got up and before she could react, he brought her out of the river embankment. Shi Mengwan could only follow his footsteps and reach the place where she parked her car. Only now did she know that Jean Hauser might have been following her just now. She didn't get into the car. Shi Mengwan bit her lip and stood in front of the car and looked at him. Jean Hauser, what exactly do you want? She didn't call him Mr. Jean anymore. At this time, that form of address was really too pretentious. Jean Hauser stood in front of the car and didn't speak. Shi Mengwan took a deep breath and told herself not to be angry, not to be angry. Jean Hauser, can you tell me what exactly you want? She didn't want to be like this anymore. It's not the first time. You can come and go as you please. You can even do it if you want. Her words were a little vulgar, but they were the truest thoughts in her heart at this moment. I'm not a prostitute. Jean Hauser. She was a woman, an ordinary woman. She longed for love, but the premise was that the person who gave her love was her dear brother. She was a stubborn person. Since she had decided on her dear brother, she wouldn't change her mind. If you weren't my dear brother, please stay away from me, okay? She couldn't play his game, and she couldn't be like him, disappearing after having sex with her. He didn't even leave a word. But when he appeared again, he pretended as if nothing had happened and took advantage of her. Jean Hauser, please stay away from me. Her tone was very serious and sincere. She had long realized that she was always weak in front of Jean Hauser. She didn't like such weakness, and she wanted to change this. Goodbye. After saying this, she took out the car keys from her coat. When she wanted to get into the car, Jean Hauser took her car keys and got into the driver's seat. Jean Hauser, what did he mean? Get in the car. Jean Hauser's voice was indifferent. Shi Mengwan gritted her teeth and stood at the door of the car without moving. Get out of the car. Get in the car. Chapter 660. She didn't move, and neither did Jean Hauser. Shi Mengwan gritted her teeth. The cold wind gave her a headache. In the end, she could only go around to the other side of the car and get in. She didn't speak. She turned her back to Jean Hauser and didn't look at him. She just looked at the scenery outside the car window. This was the direction of her home. After Shi Mengwan saw it clearly, she couldn't help but call out, "Stop!" As soon as she asked him to stop, Jean Hauser really stopped. She turned to look at Jean Hauser, wanting him to get out of the car. However, before she could say anything, Jean Hauser actually got out of the car. This time, it was Shi Mengwan's turn to be shocked. Was Jean Hauser so easy to talk to? She was a little suspicious and couldn't help but glance at Jean Hauser. Her gaze followed Jean Hauser outside the car. She found that Jean Hauser had gone to a convenience store nearby. Shi Mengwan glanced in that direction, then wanted to sit in the driver's seat and drive away. However, she found that Jean Hauser had actually pulled out the key. She could only sit there without moving and look at Jean Hauser, not understanding what he was thinking. Jean Hauser soon came out, and he seemed to be carrying a bag in his hand. He got into the car, threw the bag on the back seat, and started the car again. Shi Mengwan couldn't help but look back. Unfortunately, it was too dark in the car, so she couldn't see clearly. She looked at Jean Hauser's face again. Jean Hauser. She bit her lip and seemed to be organizing her words in her mind. I admit that I treated you as someone else. She turned her face away, unable to continue. What did she say? She said that she did not treat him as someone else, that he was the person in her heart. From the age of 12 to the age of 25, for the past 13 years, she had been thinking about him every single day. But now, she had to force herself to tell him that she only thought of him as someone else? Jean Hauser glanced at her with a gloomy gaze. But he went back to driving seriously. It wasn't too far from her apartment, so it wouldn't take long for them to arrive. The car stopped and Shi Mengwan got out of the car. Jean Hauser got out of the car and took the bag from the back of the car seat. Shi Mengwan reached out to take the key from Jean Hauser's hand, but he had already stepped into the car. It was only then that Shi Mengwan saw clearly what was in the bag in his hand. Although only a corner was revealed, it was enough for her to see it clearly. Looking at the boxes of ultra-thin Okamoto, she blushed and quickly followed Jean Hauser. No, Jean Hauser. Jean Hauser walked quickly. He entered the apartment building in a few steps and pressed the button for the elevator. Jean Hauser, can we talk? Shi Mengwan bit her lip. She still wanted to say something, but the elevator came down and someone came out. When he saw Jean Hauser and the other man, he took another look at them. The combination of a handsome man and a beautiful woman was always more eye-catching. Shi Mengwan couldn't say anything else. She lowered her head and stood a step behind Jean Hauser. The man had left. Jean Hauser entered the elevator. Shi Mengwan stood there without moving for a long time. Outside the elevator, Jean Hauser and she looked at each other. The last person to admit defeat was Shi Mengwan. She stood in. She felt powerless. This feeling of helplessness made her not in the mood to speak until she entered the house. The moment she entered the door, she stood at the door and looked at Jean Hauser, who seemed to have entered an uninhabited land. Jean Hauser, let's have a good talk, okay? Jean Hauser casually placed the bag in his hand on the coffee table, then walked to her and stood in front of her. Shi Mengwan closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was a hint of determination in her beautiful almond-shaped eyes. I'm sorry, I said it just now. I treated you as someone else. Maybe my behavior wasn't appropriate and made you misunderstand. I apologize to you. I hope you understand that I'm not a prostitute, and I'm not a very casual woman. Shi Mengwan didn't want to continue pestering him. She would rather lower her stance first. She didn't quite understand what Jean Hauser was thinking. No matter what, she felt that the way the two of them got along wasn't normal. Every time they met, they would have sex, and after sleeping, they would split their things. She thought that if she said this, he would understand. She looked up at Jean Hauser and found that he was standing still. Jean Hauser? Are you done? She didn't express herself clearly. What I mean is, Jean Hauser, this is my home, my place. I hope you can leave this place now. Jean Hauser looked at her face, which obviously wanted to chase him away, and took a step forward. Shi Mengwan's back leaned against the door. She was 1.7 meters tall, but in front of Jean Hauser, who was 1.8 8 meters tall, she wasn't tall enough. She raised her head and looked at him. Jean Hauser, it's getting late. Please. A kiss landed on her lips. Shi Mengwan quickly reacted after a momentary daze. She struggled with all her might, and her movements were more intense than before. Jean Hauser had no choice but to stop because of her interference. However, he didn't let go of her. Instead, he placed his hands on both sides of her body. Jean Hauser. Shi Mengwan felt that she had already made her words very clear. I've already said it. I just treat you as someone else. Her lips were pressed against his again. He was grinding against her lips with a force that made her feel pain. Woo-woo. She looked at him with a cold gaze. He was also looking at her, not giving in at all. It was almost a stalemate. She felt pain and opened her mouth to bite him. He retreated and took her again. In the end, Shi Mengwan was the first to lose. She was panting and her legs were weak. She almost couldn't stand. His big hand was on her waist. He wrapped her in his arms and didn't let her fall from his arms to the ground. Jean. After kissing for too long, her voice felt a little hoarse. She swallowed her saliva. Jean Hauser's hand caressed her captivating red lips. His slightly cold fingertips gently brushed past, causing Shi Mengwan's body to tremble uncontrollably. You treat me as someone else? Jean Hauser moved closer to her, his hands still on her lips. He narrowed his eyes and stared at her face. Yes. Shi Mengwan nodded. She looked away and didn't look at Jean Hauser's face. I treated you as someone else. Now I know that you're not, so let's just leave it at that. You want to end it? Jean Hauser's voice was low. Shi Mengwan bit her lip and nodded again. She didn't speak, and Jean Hauser didn't speak either. The room was very quiet. The air conditioner wasn't turned on. Shi Mengwan had been leaning against the door and felt a little cold. She subconsciously twisted her body. Her waist tightened, and Jean Hauser once again pulled her into his arms. He suddenly moved closer, and the distance between their faces was less than a centimeter. Treat me as someone else? He asked again. Shi Mengwan gritted her teeth and turned to look at him with a firm gaze. She saw the corners of Jean Hauser's lips curl up slightly. His forehead pressed against hers. If that's the case, then why don't you continue being someone else? Shi Mengwan was speechless. She didn't know what she could answer. The moment Jean Hauser was about to pick her up, she realized that something was wrong. No way. Why? Jean Hauser stopped for a moment, still staring at her face. Anyway, no way. Shi Mengwan pressed her hands against his chest. Her mind couldn't think very fast at this moment. His aura, his embrace, and his kiss would make her unable to think. You have a fiancé. Yes, that was the reason. As if she had an idea, she suddenly raised her head and looked at Jean Hauser. You already have a fiancé. You can't do this. Jean Hauser's reaction was to pick her up forcefully and bring her into the room. Jean Hauser. I don't have a fiancé. Chen. He didn't give her a chance to ask. He kissed her lips. When he passed by the coffee table, he gently hooked his pinky finger and picked up the bag of condoms. Shi Mengwan felt cold when she slept until midnight. She turned over and instinctively moved her body closer to the heat source. She felt like she was surrounded by someone. The warm chest made her no longer feel cold. She almost sighed as she pressed her face against the heat source. This pillow was really comfortable to hug. Shi Mengwan rubbed her face against the pillow, but she felt that something was wrong. It was firm and warm, broad and strong. This wasn't the touch of a pillow. She suddenly opened her eyes. What she saw was a piece of wheat-colored skin. She could even see 2 thin scratches on it. She had left them yesterday. Realizing this, she instinctively took a step back. The hand on her back made it impossible for her to retreat. She looked up and saw Jean Hauser's enlarged face in front of her. She panicked for some reason and started to pull his hand. She clearly wanted to make things clear with Jean Hauser yesterday, but in the end, the two of them rolled together again? This wasn't what she wanted. Shi Mengwan felt a headache coming on. Jean Hauser's hand was taken away by her, but in the next second, it landed on her shoulder. Her body was pressed back, and her body was suppressed by someone. The man had woken up at some point. He was lying on top of her and staring at her face with a burning gaze. "Let go of me." Seeing that he didn't let go of her, Shi Mengwan looked up at him. "Jean Hauser, why aren't you leaving? Do you think I'm that kind of casual woman?" Seeing that Jean Hauser's brows furrowed, she reached out to push him again. "Jean Hauser, don't you mind if I think you're another man? I already answered this question yesterday." As Jean Hauser spoke, he lowered his head and bit her shoulder. The force wasn't strong, but it made her feel a little pain. Shi Mengwan was furious and spoke without thinking. "What kind of woman do you want? Let's not talk about others. Chen Feifei is your girlfriend, right? Aren't you afraid that she'll be unhappy if you know what you're doing to me here?" Jean Hauser stopped for a moment. There was a flash of darkness in his eyes. "Don't mention her. What happened between them had nothing to do with Chen Feifei. I don't want to mention her either." Shi Mengwan's emotions were complicated. "But the problem is she's your girlfriend, isn't she?" Jean Hauser's face moved closer to her. "Do you mind?" "I mind." Shi Mengwan looked at his face and didn't want to say that she minded very much. "But this isn't because I have deep feelings for you, but because I don't want to be a mistress. No woman would like to be a mistress, and she was no exception." Jean Hauser stared at her face for a long time and finally said, "She has heart disease." This could be considered an explanation. After saying that, he lowered his head and kissed her shoulder again. Shi Mengwan, however, heard a different answer at this time. So that was how it was. Chen Feifei had heart disease. Perhaps she couldn't exercise vigorously. What about Jean Hauser? The two of them had done it so many times, so she could understand that his desire was very strong. Her health wasn't bad, but she begged for mercy under him every time. If Chen Feifei had heart disease, how could she bear it? Her heart felt as if it had been cut by him with a knife, and it hurt dully. She was lying to him when she said that she treated him as someone else. But he really treated her as a prostitute. She was just a substitute that Jean Hauser found because he pitted Chen Feifei. She was a woman who helped him solve his desire. Her heart hurt. It was so painful that even her body's senses became dull. The man didn't notice her absent-mindedness and pain. It was like a sword that split her apart. Then he pulled it into pieces. She was broken into pieces. From body to heart, she would never be complete again. Time passed by a few more days, and it was New Year's Day. Shi Mengwan's studio also had 3 days off. She originally wanted to go and play with Su Qingsang, but Su Qingsang went to Japan with Xiang Kaiping. Before going, she asked Shi Mengwan if she wanted to go with her. Shi Mengwan knew that this was a trip that Su Qingsang wanted to improve her relationship with Xiang Kaiping, so how could she be so blind? She drove herself back to her home. Compared to the 5 or 6 hours it took to return home 13 years ago, the distance of the repaired highway was shortened by nearly half. It only took Shi Mengwan more than 2 hours to drive home. Shi Mengwan's mother was very happy to see her. As usual, Shi Mengwan bought a lot of things and gave her parents a lot of supplements, as well as some specialties that could only be bought in Lin City. She usually sent them a lot, but it was different to bring them back herself. This time, Shi Mengwan really wanted to stay for 2 more days to celebrate New Year's Day with her family. Although such a new year was not popular in a small place, her parents were very happy to see her. They slaughtered chickens and fish, and her sister, Shi Mengru, was also very happy. They kept surrounding her and calling her sister, asking her to stay for 2 more days. Shi Mengwan agreed, but the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. She had only stayed for a day when she received a call from a client. The other party asked her to rush an urgent letter. That was an old client who had established a good working relationship with Sun Gu since the establishment of the studio. After Shi Mengwan helplessly explained to her parents, she returned to Lin City again under her mother's disappointed gaze. This time, she didn't alarm the other employees. She went straight back to the studio to meet the client. She wrote down all the other parties' requests. Because it was an urgent letter, Shi Mengwan returned to her office and began to prepare to draw. Before she started, she scrolled through her WeChat moments. She saw the pictures Su Qingsang posted, the hot springs in Japan, and the wooden plaques for prayer in Sensoji Temple. She casually clicked like. When she saw the cherry blossom patterns, sure Mingwan was inspired. When she drew, she always didn't care. Time passed by for a few hours, but she didn't notice. Her phone vibrated a few times, but she didn't notice. The sun was setting and the lights were on in the room. Sure Mengwan didn't notice that the neon lights were already shining outside. She spent a few hours to make the first draft interesting. Then, she decided on the fabric and the materials needed for the accessories. It was all done. She looked at the manuscript and was very satisfied. Whether it was designing a gown or a wedding dress for the client, most of the time, it was based on the client's ideas. Although that also gave her a sense of accomplishment. But suddenly having her own inspiration like this and drawing a picture that she was very satisfied with made her even happier. She saved the manuscript into the computer, encrypted the information, and saved it. After packing up everything, Sure Mengwan realized that she had been sitting for too long. Her arms and back were a little stiff. Especially her legs, they were extremely numb. She tried to stand up, but she sucked in a breath of cold air. In such a situation, she could only wait for her legs to go numb. Sure Mengwan looked at the time. It was already past 9 o'clock in the evening. She didn't expect that she would draw for a few hours. Her feet were so numb that she was wondering if she should call for a courier first. However, she heard a sound outside the office. Sure Mengwan was shocked. She looked outside the office and was afraid for a moment. The studio wasn't big, but because this office building was rented to her by one of her clients, the rent was relatively cheaper than outside. The place wasn't particularly big, but because Sure Mengwan paid attention to the privacy of every designer. She specially rented a 2-story space that was high. Every designer was drawing on the second floor. Her office was at the innermost part. Downstairs was the exhibition hall, as well as the reception room. Hearing the noise, Sure Mengwan felt nervous. She suddenly remembered that when she went upstairs to draw, she didn't close the door of the studio. At this time, was the person who came here a thief or someone else? No matter which one it was enough to scare Sure Mengwan. After all, she was the only one here. Her first reaction when she picked up her phone was to call the police. But before calling the police, she should first find a place to hide, right? She heard the sound of footsteps going upstairs, and she became more and more nervous. The place to turn on and off the lights was at the door. She was anxious to turn off the lights and close the door. However, the numbness in her feet still hadn't passed. Waves after waves. Sure Mengwan felt extremely uncomfortable, and she was afraid and anxious. Her back was even covered in a layer of sweat. Seeing that the footsteps were getting closer and closer, she gritted her teeth and stood up, wanting to run to the door. She quickly closed the door before the person came. Sure Mengwan dragged her numb legs around the desk. Just as her hand touched the door, the person outside had already come in. She panicked and instinctively went to close the door. The door was pushed by someone skillfully. She was caught off guard, and her feet were numb. Her body actually fell backwards. She thought that she would fall for sure, but someone was one step faster to support her body. She was stunned for a moment. When she saw Jean House's familiar face, she suddenly exploded. She said a few words consecutively. Her feet were so numb that she couldn't stand up. The aftereffects of fear made her body weak. She gritted her teeth, raised her hand, and punched Jean House's shoulder. Be asterisk starred, you be asterisk starred. Do you know that you scared me to death? You're too much of a be asterisk starred. You be asterisk starred. She didn't know many curse words, so she repeated the word be asterisk starred over and over again. She relaxed and her feet went limp. She was about to slide down again. Jean House quickly picked her up. He placed her on the chair in front of the desk. What's wrong with you? Sure Mengwan couldn't say anything. She just felt terrified. Just now, she really thought that a bad person had come. She lowered her head, and her eyes were a little red. No matter how strong she wasn't a woman. Her heart was beating very fast and anxiously. It took her a few minutes to calm her heart down. She looked up at Jean Hause and swallowed her saliva. She finally calmed down a little. What are you doing here? If he hadn't suddenly appeared just now, she wouldn't have been so scared. The last time he woke up on her bed, he pressed down on her again, and when she went into the bathroom to take care of herself, he left as quietly as before. She wouldn't be as disappointed as she was the first time. She understood one thing. In Jean House's heart, she was Qin Feifei's substitute. She was just taking on his expectations for Qin Feifei. Was it sad? Was it sad? Was it sad? She felt bad. But no matter how sad or uncomfortable she felt, she was the one who asked for it. She was the one who gave him a chance. But if she did it again, she would probably still make the same choice. She missed her dear brother too much. Even if there was only a sliver of a chance, she would try her best to get close to her dear brother. She looked at Jean Hause, but she couldn't control her tone. There was a hint of rebuke in it. Jean Hause looked at her pale face. Are you okay? She didn't seem to be well. I'm fine. Sure, Mengwan was no longer afraid, but her expression didn't recover so quickly. You haven't told me yet. Why are you here? I called you, but you didn't answer. He called her? When did that happen? Sure, Mengwan's phone was placed on the desk. She reached out and picked it up. There were indeed a few missed calls. However, they were all unfamiliar numbers. She couldn't help but look up at Jean Hause. Is this your phone number? Yes. Jean Hause nodded, took her phone, and saved his number. Sure, Mengwan looked at his actions and entered his full name. Jean Hause. It was an extremely unfamiliar title that showed their current relationship. She didn't stop him, but in her heart, she decided to block his number later. Why are you looking for me? I went to your house, but you weren't there. This sentence could be considered an explanation. Sure, Mengwan watched him put down his phone. She was sitting and he was standing. In comparison, he was much taller than her. The pressure was very strong and she didn't like it. Why did you go to my house again? She tried her best not to sound so resentful. If you want a woman, you can go find a prostitute. No, with your conditions, as long as you wave your hand, there should be many women for you to choose. Isn't that so? Although she didn't understand how Qiao Zhe had become the current Jean Hause. She also didn't understand how the dear brother who had nothing back then had become an elite in the business world. But even without these external blessings, just Jean House's face alone could attract many women, right? Why did he insist on clinging to her? Jean Hause narrowed his eyes and frowned because of her words. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.